This story begins the way most good ones do, with a bunch of Icelandic peasants playing tetherball. Any guidebook will tell you that Icelanders adore the game of tetherball above all others, going so far as to mention it in their national anthem. So it is not surprising that a group of Icelandites would put aside their many troubles to engage in a spirited tetherball contest on the afternoon of a lovely spring day in June in the early part of the 19th century. The gentle thwacking of the ball resounded through the town square of Grindavik for hours, until a single human voice disrupted the proceedings in a tragic way. It was a chimney sweep's boy, and the name he cried out as he came running up to the frolicking tetherballers was known to them all, and gone was their enthusiasm for the game, and concerned became their brows. The boy repeated one horrible sentence again and again. "Something terrible has happened to Dari Stanislad." In the end, 10 or 12 prominent well-wishers gathered beside Dari Stanislad's bed in his modest home as his life slipped away from him. His head was wrapped in a bandage, and the doctor monitored his pulse with several shakes of the head. Another man stood beside the bed with quill pen in hand, awaiting any word from Dari that might be recorded for posterity. At 2:07 p.m, Dari's blue eyes opened, looking around the room woozily. "He's about to say something," the doctor cried. "The final words of a man who made magic from them," noted Dari's ancient cleaning woman. Dari's eyes fluttered. With enormous effort, he whispered, "By the order of the prophet, we ban that boogie sound," he croaked. "Degenerate the faithful, with that crazy Casbah sound." Then his eyes closed for good. Dari Stanislad was dead at 33. The doctor stepped out into the hallway where no less than 20 young girls from town awaited his pronouncement. "Dari Stanislad," the doctor said, "the author of the most glorious romantic words in history, has become one with the ages." The girls gasped. Distraught weeping was heard in the hallway. "How did it happen?" a girl of just 19 asked, clutching roses to her bosom. The doctor said, "Some young boys were trying to invent a curious summary game they call Base the Ball. One of them fought off a tricky split-fingered slider and lined a hard foul as Dari was walking past." "At least it was a sudden blow," Dari's laundress said. "Actually, he caught the foul," the doctor informed them, "but in his joyful celebrating, he fell over a goat and swallowed the ball." "I gotta tell you, that's not going to look good in the history books," Quill Pen noted. In his room, Dari Stanislad slept his gentle, eternal sleep. 15 minutes after his passing, there was just one mourner left to stay with him. Everyone else had begun to run through the streets to spread the news. The mourner was a beautiful young woman with blonde hair. She sat gently on the edge of Dari's bed, then reached out and touched his cheek, as softly as she could. As she realized she'd never touched him once, for any reason, in all the time she had known him, all the time he had courted her so fruitlessly. She turned to look at Dari's desk, which sat in the corner of the room under a mountain of manuscripts. "Were you all done, Dari?" she asked aloud. "Was there anything left to say?" She rose off the bed and moved over to the desk, touched the manuscript that lay atop that mountain. It was called Deeper Understanding. She lifted it and looked at the one just underneath, which was entitled Everywhere a Fading Voice. The young woman noticed one manuscript hiding by itself, off to the side of the pile. She lifted it, turned to the first page, and winced upon seeing 2 words etched beneath the title. "Oh, Dari," she whispered, "I'll make sure no one finds this." There was a small wooden box on the desk that the great author had often used to seal away his works. It was empty now, and the woman placed the manuscript inside it with great care. The box was then closed and latched. When she left the room 20 minutes later, she took it with her, and no one saw. The title of that secret manuscript was The Cobbleswoddler's Tale. The dedication conjured this young woman's name. After the opulent state funeral, things slowly got back to normal, as evidenced by the fact that in no time at all, people were disposing of waste materials and trash at their usual revolting rate. It was the job of dozens of depressed old Icelandic men in white long johns to hurl the stuff into its proper receptacle, and on Thursday they were seen working on a beach near a large sign that read, "The Atlantic Ocean, soon to be the world's largest dumping ground." Many of Dari Stanislad's possessions were passed down the chain of men towards the water, having been judged either beyond repair or just pathetically tasteless, and the small wooden box containing the only known copy of the Cobbleswoddler's tale was launched into the hungry surf. For 40 years, that box swooshed around in the open ocean. The box saw much on its journeys and spent some time inside the stomachs of various slimy sea creatures before it washed ashore in one of America's fine mid-Atlantic states. The first sounds it heard were of cannons and gunshots, because the Civil War happened to be going on. 2 armed Confederate soldiers ran along a cloudy beach in March of 1865, parched and panting, desperate to convey news of a shocking northern advance. One of the soldiers tripped over the box and fell face first into the sand. "Come on, Tommy, come on!" cried the other soldier, clutching his wounded elbow, feeling pretty sorry he'd ever agreed to start killing people for $6 a month. "Wait, Orrin," Tommy said, picking up the box. "I think I found something. Look." Tommy got the box open and exhumed the crumpled pages within. "Oh my gosh," he said excitedly. "An original manuscript by Dari Stanislad." Orrin jumped up and down happily. "We can sell this to some stupid northern scholar, buy supplies for our badly defeated regiments, and launch an offensive that will turn the tide of the war," he announced. 2 days later, Orrin was bayoneted 11 times by his own grandmother, who was fighting for the other side. The box lay beneath the soil of the battlefield for another 60 years or so, until the Prohibition era. On a starry summer night in the 1920s, 3 silhouettes crept across that soil with stealth and purpose. The famed gangster Al Capone was heard to call out orders to his cronies under a gibbous moon. "All right," he told them, pointing with evil intent to 3 separate spots. "Bury Louis Gaga there, James the Giant Peach there, Rabbi Ben Levi Yashabovitz there." The hoods were just 15 minutes into their corpse-concealing duties when one of them struck something solid. "Mr. Capone, I found something," he cried, prying Dari Stanislad's wooden box loose from the earth and opening it. Capone's flashlight shone down on the title page. "Wow, Dari Stanislad," said Hood number 2. "He's my favourite of all 19th century Icelandic writers." Capone grinned. "This baby's bypassing the safe and going under a secret stone in Iowa," he told the hoods that night, "where no one will ever find it, not even me." Capone was right about that, as not only did he never find the manuscript in the box again, but he eventually forgot about it entirely, what with all the shooting and the stealing and the tax evasion and the killing and such. Drinker's Nest, Iowa was where the box went, and Drinker's Nest, Iowa was where it stayed. Right through the 1930s, the Second World War, the moon landing, and Braveheart's puzzling Best Picture victory. Only when a curious rat terrier puppy named Rubles unearthed it did it find a new home, and he dragged that box all the way across rural Route 61 into neighbouring Dix Notch, Iowa. There, on a cloudless morning, 2 teenagers were seen setting neon-coloured balls on the tee mat of hole number 1 at Citrus Larry's Micro Golf, advertised as miniature golf without all the stress. The holes at Citrus Larry's were about 5 feet long, and the cups were the size of frisbees. The so-called hazards consisted of oddly shaped bricks and empty IV bags from Dix Notch Mercy Hospital. "All right, man," said Titus Frempert, garbed in his usual Metallica t-shirt and jeans the colour of tainted clams. "This is for the championship of the universe." His buddy Kylie Stivitz, dressed in his usual Megadeth t-shirt and jeans the colour of diseased carp, tapped the ball forward towards something called the Windmill of Death, which had never revolved even a fraction of a degree. The ball disappeared beneath the inert mill on its way towards the cup, but it never came out the other side. "Oh, man," Titus said, trembling. "What can you be feeling at this moment?" Kylie gawked. They ventured forward and peered underneath the aforementioned windmill of death. Their chocolate-streaked hands investigated the darkness within. "I got something," Kylie said, pulling out the Cobbleswoddler's tail, which Rubles had dragged beneath the windmill the night before and finally left behind when he realized he could not ingest it. "What is it?" Titus asked, fascinated. Kylie turned the object over and over. "I think it's one of those book things," he said uncertainly. "I'll bet Citrus Donny would give us money for it," Titus exclaimed. Citrus Donny's used books, records and pants, situated on Salmon Street, had seen one or two better days. Citrus Donny weighed about 900 pounds, and he intimidated the two young enterprisers somewhat, but they were utterly determined to get what they wanted. Kylie held the Cobbleswoddler's tail out with one simple statement: "Give us money for this book." Citrus Donny examined it at great length, from every possible angle. He said at first. "Is it a Stephen King?" Titus nodded hopefully. We think so." "Doesn't have his name on it," Donny informed them. "But I'll give you $2, because it's old." "We want the big pants," Kylie ventured. Donny turned and looked behind him, where a pair of gigantic novelty jeans had hung on the wall since the day of the store's unfortunate conception. "The pants are yours," Donny proclaimed. Frankly, the pants had become a real fire hazard. They were beginning to pop up in horrifying scenarios in Donny's nightmares. The strange history of the original manuscript of the Cobbleswoddler's tale continued unabated. A bespectacled gentleman named Artemus Bickenby came across Dari Stanislad's play on a rainy Tuesday at Citrus Donny's whilst he was trying to find a nice coffee table book about the history of ticks. He pulled the Cobbleswoddler's tale off the shelf out of curiosity, and seeing the name etched into the cover, his jaw dropped. "Oh my God! I don't believe it," he said aloud. "My brother is named Dari. Won't he be shocked when he sees someone else has the same name?" He bought the manuscript for $4 and walked straight downtown to the Burger Within, where he ingested a triple eat patty with extra pongo sauce. When he threw his trash away, the Cobbleswoddler's tail swooshed right into the can with it. Not the most attentive man in Dick's Notch was Artemus Bickenby. It all came to a head at the county dump just one day later, where, during a sunny noontime, two esteemed literature professors from the nearby Dick's Notch Community College sat beside massive, disgusting trash pile 8, nursing almost identical ham and soy sauce sandwiches. It was a daily routine of theirs that came to a thudding halt when a dump truck passing by unloaded 114,000 pounds of detritus within 10 feet of their shoes. "I'll tell you, friend," the first scholar had just been saying to the second, "ever since my in-laws moved in, it seems like this is the only quiet place a man can sit and enjoy the classic works of Dari Stanislad in peace." "I fully agree with your statement," came the reply from his lunchmate. "I myself enjoy sitting here and reading the works of the revered Icelandic author you just mentioned." It was then that the Cobbleswoddler's tale fell betwixt them, surfing pleasantly upon an assortment of old radishes, mouldy tea bags, and a gross of misprinted Denny's placemats. "This is incredible!" the first scholar cried as they pored over the slightly smelly discovery. "Absolutely," the other agreed. "I have a cousin named Dari. Won't he be delighted to see someone's named that too?" They got the thing cleaned up with a little soap and a little speed stick, and then the real fun began. If only they had known how Dari had tried and tried, made every possible effort to speak to Natalia just once in those last days of August 1825. There wasn't a custom house, park, or alleyway in Grindavik that he didn't wander, not a ruse he didn't attempt to make himself heard, but none of it had worked since the great misunderstanding. For 3 weeks he did not write, did not attend the rehearsal of his new play, did not speak to anyone but his closest friends, and even then, it was only for news of Natalia. Sometimes he resorted to merely watching her from behind a tree near the riverside, or leaving a note with the owner of her favourite cafe. These notes were never read. He went through the usual stages of despair, and then through a few stages that were not quite so predictable. He slept far more than usual, especially through the endless afternoons. It got so bad for him finally that there was one day when he did not leave his room, and not because he was busy furiously writing notes to the woman he'd lost. Rather, he simply did not have the energy to rise out of bed until well past noon. He killed time for several hours by going through his desk and cleaning out old notes and papers, occasionally finding himself staring out the window for long, featureless stretches. He napped twice, lay in bed quietly until dusk, read yesterday's newspaper front to back, and after that he went to sleep. When he awoke the next day, he found that he wanted to someday write an entire book about the 24 hours he had lost to his room, and he would make it the entirety of his autobiography. He would try to accept the challenge of writing the only truly honest life story of a lonely writer ever penned, and confine it entirely within the four walls and the empty heart that had encaged him from Sunday's dawn to Monday's. For just a few hours, his life had purpose again. He was going to write something great, and what would make the book so much more impressive would be the fact that not once within its borders would he insult or distress the name of the unattainable woman who had refused to set him free. From The Literature and Near Literature of the 19th Century, published 1956. Dari Stanislad was born in Grindavik, Iceland, in the year 1792. The son of a fisherman, the famous writer's early days were spent cleaning and cubing trout, sometimes as many as 4,000 per day. Upon going off to college, he began to write sonnets while studying Icelandic literary classics such as So High Up on This Map We Are and A Little Like Finland. One day, he found his muse when a pretty young girl accidentally smiled at him during a class they shared together. Stanislad had discovered the concept of true love, and from the series of humiliating and devastating rejections that followed, sprung his first play. From then on, he enjoyed greater and greater success, but because his native country Iceland was a small and pointless one, few outside his land appreciated his genius. In fact, during his life, he never once left the country where he was born. Eventually, though, the entire world learned of Stanislad's gifts, and today he is recognized as one of the greatest writers of love stories of all time. He died a bachelor in 1825, some say of consumption, but rumour has it instead that he fell face down in a mud puddle and drowned there. When he was done reading this selection aloud to his class of 13, 35-year-old Owen Trittle closed the book and set it upon his desk in room 119C of the Twenke building on the campus of Dix Notch Community College. "Okay," he said to his visibly bored students, "I am now going to pass out these shockingly decrepit school copies of a Dari Stanislad play for you to read. It's called Deeper Understanding, and it's yet another one of his works in which everyone is just absolutely smitten with everyone else, and everything ends with happy happiness, just like in real life. Any questions?" A young scholar in a T-shirt whose printed message criticised its reader for simply being born raised his hand. Yeah. How come if this dude was so romantic, he never got married?" Owen went into his rote answer. Well, apparently just before he died, Stanislad was desperately pursuing a woman who wouldn't give him the time of day. Plus, you have to remember, he went when he was only 33, though most people don't buy that mud puddle story anymore. There's much more evidence suggesting a massive avalanche trapped him inside a bakery. He pointed to someone else. "Susanna Jennifer, you have a question too?" The good lady said pointedly, snapping her gum. "Which state is Iceland the capital of?" At that moment, the PA system above their heads crackled. "Can I have your attention, please? Students, faculty, and visiting grandparents," came the voice of the college president, Smiley. "Please dismiss your class 15 minutes early. There will be a very special press conference in the cafeteria at 1 o'clock. Also, the college is running out of chalk. Please restrict your teaching activities to oral presentations until Friday, if possible. That is all." Did he say press conference? Owen wondered aloud. At this dump? He drifted over to the cafeteria and realised halfway there that today was his 35th birthday. Looking down at himself, Owen took a brief inventory. The jeans had been worn for 3 straight days, were still in good shape. There were only 2 holes in his Nikes, and his hair was still long enough to enrage his mother. Not bad, not bad. In other good news, he'd been receiving HBO for free since January through a catastrophic wiring error. He was perhaps not quite fully prepared to be the central character in a story, like the one he was about to fall into, but few people were. 15 or so reporters, the largest gathering of the media ever in Dick's Notch, were clumped in the cafeteria. The rest of the place was filled with students and faculty who had finally found a reason other than Waffle Party Wednesday to spend time in this abject room. President Smiley appeared before a hastily made podium in his hastily made suit and swelled his chest to full plumage. "Thank you," he said to the gathering, for no real reason Owen could figure out. "My name is Nevin Smiley. It is my honour and privilege to inform you all that the school has come into possession of a rather amazing discovery. A lost manuscript by the great Icelandic writer Dari Stanislad has been uncovered just 2 miles from the school. It appears to be a play written in his own hand." Owen whistled through his teeth as reporters scribbled in tiny notebooks and video cameras whirred. "The manuscript was found at the county dump and salvaged by 2 of our own professors," Smiley went on. "It is now legally our possession. After it is authenticated, more details of the find will be released." A man standing next to Owen wearing an ID badge from the Dick's Notch Weekly Snoop and Shopper stepped forward. "President Smiley," he said, 2 years ago you announced that the college had come into possession of a rare director's cut of Spaceballs. How can we be sure that this too is not merely a mistake?" Smiley became flustered. "Well, it wasn't me who announced that, and I can't speak for what happened 2 years ago when I wasn't here," he stammered. I can only say that the old president of the college is now back living with his parents." It was then that Billy O'Labenby, the editor-in-chief of the Dick's Notch Community College newspaper, raised his hand and unleashed an unforeseen firestorm. "President Smiley," he demanded to know, "is it true that the college is running out of post-it notes?" "That's a lie," Smiley shouted, and all hell broke loose inside the cafeteria as he was suddenly swarmed with questions. Owen closed his eyes against the flashbulbs that winked and popped around him and got out while the getting was good. He exited the cafeteria beside James Purcell, the college's only science teacher who possessed a valid library card. Jimmy was holding a microscope that had been broken by a runaway deer, which had been a growing problem in the hallways. "Well, I guess this takes the spotlight away from an otherwise uneventful grandparents' day," Owen observed as they strolled, 1 or 2 reporters oozing around them in an attempt to find decent cell phone reception. "Anything about this sound fishy to you, Jimmy?" "Sorry, Owen, I can't talk right now," Jimmy said. "Melted Meat Monday is about to start, and I absolutely have to be the first in line." Owen understood. Themed nutrients were one of the few things he got genuinely excited about these days, having totally nailed the whole quiet desperation thing, as he often told friends who had long since moved out of the area. By nature, he was exceedingly easy to please on a basic sensory level. The consumption of an unusually soft cookie or the act of finding a baseball card on the street tended to send him off into whistling a Fleetwood Mac tune for the remainder of the day. His passivity had turned him more or less into something akin to a competent amateur's oil painting of a creek beside a field on a summer's day. Harmless, quiet, forgettable. If more complicated colours and textures lay hidden underneath the visible image, well, it wasn't really the museum-goer's responsibility to scrape it away to see them, especially after paying $13 for parking and a stupid little magnet from the gift shop. From the cafeteria, he bought a steak-'em with fries and pongo sauce and slumped into an English office. A new employee named Dari Stanislad was sitting at a makeshift desk that had been scavenged from the local women's prison, grading papers with admirable concentration. "Hey, Davy," Owen greeted him. "Did you get all those erasers pounded?" Davy stood up. When he spoke, it was with a trace of an accent whose origin Owen kept meaning to ask about. "Almost, Owen," he said agreeably. "It's sort of an all-day project." Owen sighed. "Yeah, I can't believe the machine broke down again." He turned and began to head back out, but Davy called after him. "Say, Owen," he said, "I heard about the manuscript. Do you think there's any truth to it?" Owen rolled his eyes. Davy, we're dealing with a college whose greatest claim to fame was the varsity soccer team's arrest for stealing porn from the student bookstore. I would tend to doubt it. Wouldn't that be something, though? Davy asked him. A Stanislad manuscript discovered after all these years. Owen happened in that moment to get a good long look at Davy's gaunt face. Speaking of famous people, he said, frowning, do people ever come up to you and say you look a hell of a lot like Kevin Spacey? Davy swallowed uneasily. Not so much. I'd better get back to work, Owen, he said, and purloined a fry from Owen's overflowing styrofoam cup. He knew that this was bound to make him forget all about the subject. The subject being, of course, Davy's features, which were as identical to Dari Stanislad's as could possibly be. Dari breathed a whoosh of relief when Owen left him, and reminded himself to perhaps remove all traces of the goatee he had cultivated in 1825 before he came to work again. That left Owen with 8 spare minutes until his next class, The Secret Life of the Gerund. Sitting down behind his desk, he pulled open its top drawer to reveal a fully inflated whoopee cushion resting upon his grade book. How many times do I have to tell you kids, he said to no one in particular, it won't make a sound unless it's sat on. A procession of unique irritations entered the room. Nevin Smiley was followed by 3 incredibly old men, 2 of whom walked with stout wooden canes, while the third just kind of put his hand on the shoulder in front of him and hoped for the best. Owen, Smiley said when the group was inside the room, we've got to speak with you. Owen was already raising a finger in self-defence. Look, Nevin, I'm sorry I made that remark about the cafeteria food to the newspaper, but I really did find those pennies inside my baked potato. It's not about that, Smiley said. The Board of Regents has decided we need to keep this whole manuscript issue in-house. We're looking for someone to read the manuscript and give us a full report. Nobody's even read it yet? Owen asked. The print is really, really small, Owen, Smiley told him impatiently. We feel your youthful eyesight and Stanisladian background make you the perfect man for the job. Behind him, one of the old men trembled a bit and then sank with great relief behind an empty student's desk. Okay, Owen said. Where is this background you speak of? I'm a grammar teacher. Owen, when I hired you, your resume claimed you had a master's degree in English and that you taught an advanced seminar in Stanislad's works at Princeton 8 years ago. Yeah, a master's degree in English, Owen said, his eyes wandering to the most distant corners of the room. That's certainly what I have, all right. Then it's settled, Smiley said. This find is at long last going to put the college on the map, even more so than our unique degree program in dice making. You want my advice, Nevin? Owen asked. Sell the manuscript to the highest bidder now, before it's found to be a complete fraud. Nonsense, Smiley retorted. Right now, I need you to drive over to the International Institute for Advanced Literary Studies in Frogger's Gulch and meet with a woman there who will help you out. Someone will bring the manuscript to you tomorrow. It's incredibly precious and must be handled very carefully. Take a couple of days to go through it with a highlighter. Long after Owen retired to his one-bedroom sinkhole a few miles east for a pleasant evening of Kraft macaroni and cheese, one man remained in the English office back at school, writing longhand in a journal. Dari Stanislad, Davy, as he had become known in the past few weeks to his bosses at the college, wrote by the light of a single candle he had scavenged from a ceramics class. He was still not totally impressed with the phenomenon of electric light. Dear Diary, he wrote, the worst has happened. They've discovered the Cobbleswoddler's tale. If only they knew how much I wanted this play to die with me and why. At least I'm in a good position to observe the situation. These past 2 months as a department aide haven't been so bad. I do have a pleasant master, a Mr. Owen Trittle. He's been kind enough to involve me with some practical jokes against his overseer, a Mr. Nevin Smiley. Yesterday, Owen and I taped down the button of a can of something called Lysol aerosol spray and placed it quickly within Smiley's empty office, so that he returned to a chamber flawlessly antiseptic, yet utterly devoid of any breathable oxygen. Good fun. With the discovery of the play, I suppose the question of why I've suddenly found myself here, in this strange and hectic age, is slowly being answered. It took me a few days to get over the shock of opening my eyes and realizing I was totally and completely alive. but I've quickly developed a very specific purpose of my own, and I can't wait any longer to make it happen. It remains to be seen if I have enough money and enough time to carry out my foolhardy journey." He took his journal with him on the beginning of that journey, which began on Tuesday morning, when he called out sick from work and took a taxi to Guzzler's Boot Semi-International Airport at 5:30 in the morning. He walked up to one of the ticket counters and scanned the various destinations posted on the wall behind the agent on duty. "I'd like one ticket to... let's start with Beijing," he said. "By any chance, is there anything cheaper than coach class? Perhaps I might lash myself to one of the engines?" He was understandably nervous when he fastened his seatbelt in preparation for takeoff. "Excuse me, miss," he told a passing flight attendant. "I've never flown before. If we were to crash from a high altitude, it would mean certain death, would it not?" She smiled. "Certainly, sir, either by the force of the impact or burn injuries resulting from the explosion. Would you like headphones to watch Transformers 3? He spent most of his first flight gazing at the comforting void of the brilliant white sky. He had changed for the trip into the clothes he'd found swathed around his body upon waking up in April of 2011, in a grassy park in the centre of town. They'd been very much in fashion back in 19th century Iceland. He was helpless on the plane, confronted with hours upon hours of that empty sky, from drifting into well-charted memories. He was sitting on a hill beside the Atlantic on a cloudy, windy day in 1825. 3 half-filled pages of a new play sat beside him, weighed down by a stone. The pages were all useless, he felt. His old classmate and fellow ne'er-do-well, Joff, found him at noon, swishing his feet through the grass with overwrought drama to get Dari's attention. Joff sat down cross-legged, moaning in mock pain. "Oh, Dari," he said, "how long is this business going to last? Am I to patronise with one tolerable whorehouse in all this town by myself?" "I'm afraid this particular sorrow, Joff, seems to slope deeper than most," Dari said. "Listen," Joff counselled him. "You've got professional success, a little fame, and an abundance of whatever currency it is we use in Iceland. I know a dozen girls anxious to meet you. What about Greta Logsdottir? She can cube a trout like no one else I know." "If the cubing of trout is to be my romantic yardstick, Joff, I'll ask the hand of your grandmother this very day," Dari said. Joff nodded and stood up. "Well, you think about it, Dari," he said. "You know my point of view. Love is only the answer if the question is, how can I forfeit all my disposable income?" A faint smile from Dari. Before Joff turned to leave, Dari removed from his pocket one more crumpled bit of parchment and expanded it carefully, smoothing it out with his thumbs. "Natalia asked Luke Nordahl if he'd like to publish this, in that silly poetry journal of his," he said, without looking up. "The poem is called The African Lass." He stared at Natalia Fisk's uneven handwriting on the page for a moment. "It starts out quite competently," Dari told his friend. "I would have no idea how she would know what it feels like to be in the places she refers to, since she's travelled about as far as you and I have, which is to say, not a damn bit at all." Joff nodded. One day, perhaps, he would shed this woeful Hamlet's bonds. One day. "It starts to crack a bit in the middle," Dari continued. "It loses focus, though not from lack of effort." He pointed to a spot 2/3 of the way down the page. "But then there's this line, Joff. This line, I tell you." "I know it," Joff told him. "Luke showed that to me as well." Dari took a deep, shaky breath. "And at last, she couldn't quite do it, could she? The final lines are nothing more than a crude reworking of Eggert Pettersson." He folded the paper gently, then turned his face up to Joff. "She tried her hardest, and in the end, she simply didn't have the skill," he said. "So she resorted to sculpting someone else's words. What she must have felt in that moment, Joff. Do you see? I'd like to think that you do." Joff nodded reluctantly, impartially, not knowing what else to say. He left Dari then, and went to seek out laughter and hopefully a little trouble. What more did anyone else need out of this life, he wondered. He was not worried about Dari. Not really. Joff might have been a skirt chaser and a layabout of the highest order, but he was also a very effective pragmatist. If he could not cheer his friend up now, well, There was always tonight at the tavern, or tomorrow afternoon on this same damnable hill, most likely. Time was one thing they both had plenty of, years and years in which to forget all about Natalia Fisk. Back in sunny and Chipotle-filled 2011, Nevin Smiley and a chipper fellow from North Central Iowa Security Services brought the Cobbleswoddler's tale to an unidentified location in town under the cover of mid-afternoon. After filling out a few forms, Smiley handed the manuscript across a chipped formica counter to a soft-featured, extremely quiet girl in a lab coat named Pimma. Pimma took his $10 deposit and carried the manuscript with great caution and rubber-gloved hands through a green shower curtain which divided the front of the place from the back, and then set it down inside a steel box. With a marker she wrote the words Dari Stanislad work on a piece of masking tape and affixed it to the top of the box. The box was placed on a high shelf featuring another masking tape banner that said, "To be authenticated." There were several other items of varying sizes on the same shelf, each bearing a tag. Dari Stanislad work was set beside Tchaikovsky's signature, which was next to Ernest Hemingway will, which rested beside Christ's face on tortilla chip, and slightly to the left of Hitler love letter to Scarlett Johansson. Having done her job, lonely Pimma removed her cheese sandwich and individual vanilla pudding cup from the mini-fridge, set her radio to 105.7, Dick's Notch's hottest of all possible hot mixes, and resumed her day. More or less driving with his knees because his hands were very busy bringing a double plus eat patty with happy potato party dots repeatedly to his mouth, Owen cruised along Grape Street at noon the next day. The International Institute for Advanced Literary Studies appeared on his right. It was a rare institute for advanced literary studies in that it was located in a strip mall beside Once Upon a Donut. The entire place was done in expensive marble, and his footsteps echoed impressively as he approached the counter. The wallflower named Pimma, who was doing some mid-shift moonlighting at the institute in order to make a little extra money to buy the new DVDs collector's set of Friends, looked up at Owen blankly. She pointed him to the north corridor, then stared longingly for the better part of an hour out of the front window, sincerely wishing that Friends hadn't ever had to go off the air. Owen got a little lost in the vast corridors of the Institute. Room 114 was actually open, and he knocked gently on the door before pushing his head in. A brown-haired woman of about 30 looked up from behind her desk, removing her glasses. "Hello," she said. "My name's Owen," he said. "I was sent from Dick's Notch Community College. Are you April Mahone?" "Yes, sit down," she said, taking her seat behind the cluttered desk. "I'm sure you share my excitement over this whole thing. I've been waiting my whole life for something like this." "Yeah," Owen agreed. "I'd actually always hoped to play utility infielder for the Red Sox, but this should be good for a few yucks." April peered at him doubtfully, her glasses replaced snugly on her nose. "Can I ask what your qualifications in the field are?" she asked. "Well, I've been reading at college level pretty much since college," Owen told her, "and I'm a demon on sentence diagramming." She frowned. "But the college assured me they were sending an expert on Dari Stanislad." Owen laughed. "Yeah, that's the DNCC for you. God love 'em." April Mahone shook her head, pained, looking as if this were the 14th piece of bad news she had gotten today. "If it makes you feel any better," Owen offered, "I actually have read everything he's done. And unless there's more than one Stanislad freak named April Mahone, I also read the piece you did in Michigan Review on the French translations of his sonnets." She raised her eyebrows, momentarily impressed. "You subscribe to Michigan Review?" "Well, not exactly. The English department won a subscription at a church fair ring toss." April groaned audibly. "Look, I can read the manuscript capably," he assured her. "It's being authenticated right now. This whole hubbub will probably end there, of course." "So," April said, "who is your dean hired to authenticate? Winterson at USC? McGraw at Harvard? The Classics Division at Oxford?" "Authentications by tomorrow," Owen told her. "They're over on Route 7 behind Pep Boys." Unable even to look at him now in her disappointment, April swiveled her chair to face partially out of her window, which overlooked the hammock showroom and We've Only Got Tires. "Why doesn't this surprise me?" she asked the view outside. Day after day, it seems like I'm the only one in this silly flat state who really cares about Dari Stanislad, about his writings. They're the most beautiful thing we have." "Yeah," Owen said. "Well..." April swiveled back in his direction. "Yeah, well, what?" "Nothing." "No, tell me," she said, subconsciously pointing in the general direction of his unprotected forehead with a very small stapler. Owen shrugged. "It's just that I teach for a living, and let me tell you, there's nothing young people despise more than being told day after day that Mozart and Bach are the end-all of music. Dari Stanislad and Willie S. are the only writers to perfect written language, and no one's ever going to touch Picasso or Van Gogh. Maybe we could all move into the 21st century just a wee bit." "So I guess you're saying it's stupid for me to do what I do," April said. "The preservation of words vital both to the arts and to world history." "Well, that's fine. But geez Louise, do we need a whole institute with hallways and interns and people making coffee for each other?" "I'm sort of busy here," April said. "Why don't I see you tomorrow at noon for the meeting with the college trustees, and maybe then we can discuss the manuscript further." Owen rose and moved to the door, stopping briefly to look back at her once more. "Do you ever get personal days sometimes?" he asked her. "I'm sort of lonesome on mine." Not looking up, April said, "That's because you seem to be afflicted with some sort of minor brain illness." Owen laughed. "See you tomorrow," he said, and started to head back down the hall. "You were wrong about the sonnets, I think." April sat for a moment, trying to figure out if he was trying to goad her into a rude response, or whether he had just made an honest display of some glimmer of intellect. It's a terrible thing to think that any one story from the past defines a person's life, and you certainly couldn't say that about April Mahone. She was bright, pretty, educated, but within the confines of the misadventure she would soon patiently endure, it was only a single story that programmed her responses to Owen Trittle and certain other regrettable bits of business. When she was in 5th grade, April was asked to play the lead role in the annual Thanksgiving pageant at Captain Silas D. Shaver Elementary School. This not only required mastery of wearing a construction paper bonnet, but also the memorization of 16 lines of text. After 5 weeks of constant practice and a rehearsal or two, she had set herself up for a legendary success and fallen deeply in smittenhood with Terry Mangiafrani, her 11-year-old co-star, who unfortunately possessed a well-earned reputation as a bit of a miscreant, having been suspended from school twice for 2 garter snake-related incidents. April, already a painfully shy girl, had emerged stage right on November 17th, 1991, with shaking hands and a yearning heart, as Terry emerged stage left, dressed as a pilgrim in a purple hat. Just before April opened her mouth to speak in a tremulous voice, her mother, the neighbourhood's leading Bible thumper and paranoid, walked right into the scene to usher her daughter angrily off the stage. As part of her ongoing protest against the school's lax disciplinary regimen, she steered April away from the imminent contact with that awful boy whom she'd realised was her daughter's co-star just 2 minutes before. The play was stopped, Mrs. Mahone drove her stunned little girl home, and April had to live with the aftermath of the debacle forever, up to and including Terry's silent snubbing of her achingly hopeful wave as she gazed up at his face in a high window 2 days afterward, having summoned the immense courage to walk past his house. Unpredictability, impetuousness, sudden acts of irrational, if well-intentioned exuberance, these were not April's favourite things. So it is no wonder the odds of someone like Owen making a good impression were virtually doomed. He even resembled Terry Mangiafrani just a little, but lacked Terry's rakish charm and facility with bottle rockets. Somewhere in Madison, Wisconsin, where Terry now lived and worked as a line cook, that one-time troublemaker was probably shaking his head and thinking, "Keep walking, pal. That girl is nothing but hurt." Owen was not 10 minutes out from the Institute when danger, mystery, and intrigue suddenly entered his life, along with his usual semi-annual case of swimmer's ear. As he made his way down from the sidewalk, a feeling of being followed intensified. Over his left shoulder, a small white Dodge minivan was crawling beside the curb not 10 feet away from him. The driver of the vehicle was following Owen's movement carefully, stopping and starting in jerks in relation to his nervous pace. Owen threw several furtive glances over his shoulder and walked a little faster, just a couple of 100 feet to the 7-Eleven, where he would feel much better after a monstrous cola Slurpee with no lid. The minivan followed creepily. Owen's right foot was a paltry 14 inches away from the 7-Eleven tarmac when two gigantic brutes right out of a Far Side cartoon leapt out of the Dodge and stepped in front of his path. Their Ray-Bans glittered darkly. "Okay, pal," said one of the thugs. "Get in the car." No," Owen replied. The second thug gawked at him. "No." "Why should I?" Owen challenged him. "Are you armed?" The brute was genuinely offended. "No, what do you think I am?" "Like I'm going to get inside a strange vehicle with someone I don't know," Owen said. "Yeah, that would be a good move." The thugs looked at each other briefly. "You're not the least bit interested," said Thug 1, "in why a mysterious van would be following you and why your presence is required by unknown parties?" "Enough to answer a ringing telephone, maybe," Owen said. "Why didn't you call my office?" Thug 2 lowered his head. "We couldn't get through. You're on the internet." Owen sighed heavily. "Oh, all right," he complained, and the rear door slid open, allowing him access to the ominous depths of the minivan. "All right," said Thug 1 from the back seat. "Let's hit the rendezvous point." Owen squirmed between number 1 and a third thug. "Hey, there's not enough room back here," he said. "I'm going to have to ride up front." Thug 1 put an agonized hand to his forehead. That was the problem with this job. Some kidnappings went smoothly, while others were just endlessly fiddly. Owen had just finished explaining to the muscle-bound driver why a left-handed batter usually hit more poorly against a left-handed pitcher, and how the same went for a right-handed batter against a right-handed pitcher, when they arrived at their destination. Owen was more miffed now than frightened, but followed orders to step out. On the sidewalk, he gazed up at a modest 2-story building nestled on downtown Dix Notch quietest street. A sign over the front entrance read, "The Lofty Verb Theatre and Bedazzlement Company. Ask about discounts for short attention spans." Thugs 1 and 2 ushered Owen into the lobby of the theatre. Approaching quickly from the rear of the house was a small party of men, led by a chubby behemoth bearing one of the poorer hair weaves in the county's 82-year history. He was wearing a gold satin robe and blindingly white sneakers. Beside him, a bald accountant-looking chap was jotting frantically on a clipboard. "Are you Owen Trittle?" a large man asked, when the two groups stopped before each other. "I," he declared, "am Rutherford Lamp, lead actor and dramaturge of the Lofty Verb Theatre and Bedazzlement Company. I have summoned you for a very specific purpose." "And I am Gaston Green, Mr. Lamp's agent and business partner," said the accountant. "Mr. Trittle, we want to know what is the status of the Cobbleswoddler's tale." "It seems," Lamp added, "that you have been entrusted with the task of reading the play on behalf of your university. To come to the point, we are willing to offer you a certain sum of money for the right to copy the play before it is offered to any other theatre company for performance purposes." Owen's eyes had gone round and sparkly. "Okay, I didn't hear a single word you said after the phrase sum of money." Gaston Green bit his lip. "Mr. Lamp is in need of, well, a comeback." "Is that so?" Owen asked. "Yes, it is so," Lamp said. "Certain mentally handicapped theatre critics in this godforsaken town have seen fit to castigate me for my daring theatrical experimentations in recent times. Ticket subscriptions are plummeting because of their ignorance." Owen snapped his fingers. "Wait, I know you now. Your company did Macbeth at the college last year. What was with that epilogue set in Home Depot?" "It's called artistic license," Lamp told the Philistine before him, "and I don't recall your students being very considerate of my vision." Owen mused. "So you need to put on the Cobbleswoddler's tale before anyone else to save your career and keep doing your skits or whatever." "I need no such salvation," Lamp said proudly. "Even as we speak, I am fielding several offers from national stages." Gaston Green looked confused. "Oh, sorry, I thought we weren't going to make stuff up," he said to Lamp. "Hey, if you want me to sneak you a copy of the play," Owen said, "I'll figure something out. What do I care? What kind of money are you offering here?" Green studied the carpet. It wasn't so much money we meant, more like 10% off 2 mezzanine tickets to the premiere and a tank of premium gasoline." but we want a copy of the play by noon tomorrow. Mr. Lamp has to tell our director if rehearsals for Popeye have to be cancelled." "Agreed," said Owen. "But I still want my tank filled, even if this play turns out to have nothing but roles for Egyptians or goats, or it's 8 minutes long." Lamp now took one gallant Broadway stride toward Owen's face and inflated his lungs with flourish. "Tell me, Mr. Owen," he said, "did you ever hear of my groundbreaking work in the Ontario Optical Society's 1988 benefit production of Arsenic and Old Lace?" "Yes," Owen assured him. "Yes, I sure did. Can I go now?" Just 3 hours later, back at Authentications by Tomorrow, the pretty introvert Pimmer removed the prize Stanislad manuscript from an impressive-looking metal contraption. She made note of the 14-digit number glowing faintly on the machine's digital readout and filled out a blue slip of paper, sticking it to the front of the collection of pages. She took this entire affair through a beaded curtain and set it on the counter in front of a waiting customer. Owen read the blue slip with trepidation. He looked at Pimmer and smiled faintly. She attempted a return smile, but as usual it became something bent and weak, like a pretzel that had been soaked in milk. Thus did Owen begin the task of reading my long-forgotten The Cobbleswoddler's Tale. Dari Stanislad wrote in his diary that night as his plane touched down in China, the second foreign land he had experienced in this newfound quasi-life. Owen's concentration was not quite that of a professional scholar, he wrote, but he actually made it through the play twice by midnight. More and more as he went on, his face became a picture of puzzlement. Owen Trittle was the first man in the Dick's Notch of these modern times to fully understand why the play had never been performed. "I must go now, diary. The aircraft has brought me safely to the site of my first global errand." Owen felt a trifle airsick himself upon closing the cover of the Cobbleswoddler's Tale at dawn on the 14th. His first words to his colleagues on the morning after his ordeal were simply, "This place sucks." 12 college employees and April Mahone looked at him in silence in conference room Saturn on the east side of campus. Owen stood at the head of a long scuffed oak table and repeated the words more slowly. "Trittle, what on earth are you talking about?" Nevin Smiley asked him, folding his hands nervously. "The play is awful," Owen elucidated. "It may be, in fact, the worst thing ever written by anyone in any era, using any documented alphabet." "I find this hard to believe," said the head of the history department. "Mr. Trittle, what is the plot of the play?" "Oh, the plot's very interesting," Owen told the room. "It's about a young, attractive British bachelor whose friends all seem to be getting married one by one. He resists the entire concept until he meets an American woman with whom he has a series of one-night stands. But he winds up falling in love with her and standing up his fiancée at the altar. Along the way there are numerous observations about love, friendship, and even death." Light dawned in Nevin Smiley's eyes. But that's 4 weddings and a funeral," Owen finished for him, setting the manuscript gently on the table. "Except this isn't funny, and for some reason the Hugh Grant character is a bit of a paedophile." There was an uneasy babble around the table. Owen took a seat beside April, and she did her best to ignore him, touching the cover of the manuscript possessively. "Maybe," April suggested, "we should have someone else look at the play. Perhaps the language is a bit archaic for Mr. Trittle." "Oh, not at all," Owen said. "In fact, it seems Stanislad foresaw much of our current slang, with words like pinhead and mama's boy used many, many times in place of actual intelligent dialogue." "I refuse to believe that a master like Dari Stanislad could write anything other than a masterpiece," one trustee protested. "Well, don't take my word for it," Owen said. "Have April read it tonight. She actually defended Love Me Anyway in some article." "I certainly hope you're wrong, Owen," Smiley said, with more than a hint of reproach. "The college plans to sell copies of the play for $1,500 apiece to raise funds to rebuild a computer lab. There was another sulfur explosion yesterday. Now, the authentication came back positive. Plus, we get 10% off the next one. Until we figure something out, Owen, I want you to first take the play to our branch campus in Tolliot and have Professor Thinwiddy in the drama department take a fresh look at it. Then I want you to give it to Miss Mahone so we can get a woman's perspective. In the meantime, don't let it out of your sight." April was about to make a remark about Smiley's well-seasoned sexism, but Owen waved her off. assuring her without a word that it was useless. Everyone filed out of the room. "I'm going to get a really nice Ziploc bag from the cafeteria to make sure nothing gets spilled on this baby," Owen said to April as they shuffled down the hallway. "Want to come with me? Maybe share a Fanta?" "No thanks," she said. "I think the sooner I get off this campus, the less chance my head's going to explode." She picked up her pace and left Owen far behind. Owen killed the next several hours by making a casual stab at teaching, and after a gravy-intensive Swanson's dinner at home, he drove back to campus and stole into room 119 of the Hemmelgap building to conduct some private business. The class was called Painting for You, Painting for Me, and it was taught by a chain-smoking beanpole named Hugh Coopstein, who possessed what most serious art historians would most likely agree was the filthiest smock on earth. "Okay, everyone, I trust you're all prepared to be graded on your projects," Coopstein told the 11 hopeful faces before him. "Now, if you'll remember, Friday's homework was to paint the place you were the happiest. Okay, who's first?" He walked over to a middle-aged student closest to him, who sat before his easel, with an expression of almost Hessian pride. "Very good, Reggie," Coopstein said, peering at the chaotic wave of blues and greens that lay before him. "Yes, everyone's had happy times at the ocean." He moved on, puffing away at a Newport, squinting and turning his head sideways at the next project. "Interesting, Lydia," he noted, "although that's far more frontal male nudity than I thought we had discussed." Lydia, a 62-year-old mother of 9 with orange and purple highlights in her hair, took it under advisement. The professor was deeply puzzled by the third canvas he viewed. Gerald," he said, "why does the place you were the happiest have a gas chamber?" Gerald frowned. "It's the circus," he explained. "That's the big top." Coopstein laid a hand on Gerald's shoulder. "See me after class," he advised. He then moved on to Owen's work, which Owen had laboured over for 2 consecutive nights, even through his usual daily viewing of the Channel 7 evening comedy craze. "Why, Owen," Coopstein said, rather shocked. "That's a truly impressive piece of work. What is that?" Owen let out a relieved sigh. "That's a creek 60 miles north of here," he said. "It's where my grandfather always took me when he visited. He taught me how to paint watercolours there. We would sit in the field, him with a big canvas, and me with my little one." Coopstein clapped his hands once and beamed at Owen as if he were a particularly well-made pancake breakfast. "Well, the colour and technique are ravishing," he exclaimed, and with that he leaned over and printed a tremendous A+ in permanent black marker right in the corner of Owen's hugely detailed and cloudy sky, and moved on. Owen's mind would have been utterly blown had he known what was going on just 2 buildings over, and exactly who of his acquaintance was inside that building and breathing its asbestos-tinged air. On the dimly lit stage of the college's tiny theatre, a man of 53 was staring off into some intensely concentrated zone of space of his own creation, reciting a classic text. "Wendy, darling, light of my life, you didn't let me finish my sentence," he hissed as his students watched him from the front row with awe. "I said, I'm not going to hurt you. I'm not going to hurt you. I'm just going to bash your brains in." Fully winded, the great acting teacher finally awoke from his reverie, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief. "Again, I apologize for beginning almost every one of our sessions with those haunting words, people," he said, turning to the class. "But I can't demonstrate too often how a professional actor like Mr. Jack Nicholson, whose stand-in I once dined with, can imbue a scene with such flavour when the emotional commitment to a role is at its peak. Now it's time to continue the partner scenes." April Mahone crouched just 5 feet away, looking like a woman about to be sent to death row, and whose first stop was going to be a hot lava pool filled with hungry alligators who'd just been told their Cheesecake Factory gift cards weren't valid during peak hours. It was that expression of perfect fear that Owen would have been most amazed to see. "I think we left off with April and Caesar," the great acting teacher remembered, "who will be performing the dental torture scene from Marathon Man." "All right then, you're on." April exchanged a silent glance with her partner, whose weight and height suggested he had once played every single one of the NFL linebacker and NBA power forward positions available to him by law. They managed to get to the stage and assume their blocking positions. Caesar squishing himself into a chair and opening his mouth wide, awaiting mock physical agony, while April lifted a pencil representing an electric drill over his frightened head. She was firmly convinced she would not be able to utter even her first line, and was desperately trying to think of a backup plan when a security guard walked lazily in from the back of the theatre. "Sorry, people," the guard said tiredly. "There's another radon leak. Everyone's got to evacuate the building." "Oh, for heaven's sake," the great acting teacher cried. "All right. Well, April, it appears that you and Caesar have been preempted a second time. I'm sorry. It looks like you'll both have to concentrate all your energies on the final monologues on Thursday." Caesar nearly fainted with relief and oozed out of the chair, leaving a gallon of sweat behind. April dropped her pencil to the stage and closed her eyes as the other adult students made their way out of the auditorium. "Stop being a chicken. Stop being a chicken," she said aloud, again and again, as she walked across the quad toward her car. She squeezed her eyes shut tight and vowed that from now on she would refuse, just plain refuse, to go weak at the knees like some teenager approaching a cute boy at a roller rink every time she stood up in front of people who were not her relatives. The last thing she needed just then was to hear Owen Trittle's voice calling to her from behind. She turned to see him jog up to her, out of breath, a backpack slung over one shoulder. "Hey, did I see you going into the theatre an hour ago?" he asked, as they began to walk together. "I was just visiting somebody," she lied. Her Toyota was 50 yards up ahead, sitting lonely under a single street lamp. "Is the manuscript in that backpack, I hope?" "Safe and sound," Owen said. "I'm doing you the honour of giving it directly to you instead of handing it off in the meantime to Professor Dimwitty. I'll just tell Smiley I couldn't find the Tolliot campus. It's not on any map anyway." "Thanks, I appreciate it," she said. They spent an awkward moment of silence together, and then she said to him, "So you read the unread piece? I don't think you're being completely honest about your feelings towards literature." Owen shrugged. "Oh, I thought your thing on sonnets was a movie review. I read it by accident." "All right, fair enough," she said. "Let me ask you this. What's your favourite book?" Owen gazed up at the semi-brilliant stars floating over Dick's Notch. "Helter Skelter," he said. She levelled an accusatory finger at him. "Come on," she said. They stopped beside her car. "My favourite book is Jude the Obscure," Owen admitted. "And before you ask, no, I didn't always want to be a grammar teacher." "What did you want to be?" Owen told her the truth. "I think I wanted to be a painter for a long, long time." April nodded. She unlocked her door, put her purse on the front seat, and then looked off at the empty dark lacrosse field beside the parking lot. "I wanted to be an actress," she told him. "I wanted to be Goethe in This Way of Parting, and Princess Helena in The Beach Dancer, and all the other Dari Stanislad plays. What stopped you?" "Terrible stage fright," she said. "But one day I have to do it. Even if it's in some Dick's Notch Widows Club production of Winter in Reykjavik, I have to say those words as if I mean them." "I once was an usher in college when they did that one," Owen said. "A prop lamppost fell over in the middle of a scene and knocked the actor's glass eye out." April's face became a bright neon sign of exasperation as she inserted herself into the driver's seat of the Toyota. "I guess there must be some people who think you're funny," she said. "They're probably located out west somewhere, maybe, or in the Benelux countries." "Nobody thinks I'm funny," Owen agreed, "which is why I teach college here, instead of a town with stoplights." He handed her his entire backpack. "Here's the manuscript. You might want to keep it in here to make it safe." "I'll read this and call Smiley in the morning," she said, setting the pack beside her. "Call me too. I want to hear what you think. Maybe I am wrong." "Okay," she said. "Good night, Owen." Owen shut her door and walked off to his own dented and consistently aromatic vehicle. As it turned out, April's biggest mistake that evening was not her assumption that she would be able to get up in front of her acting class and deliver her scene without having multiple breakdowns, but rather her trust that Owen would be able to master the complex art of giving one simple object to another human being for safekeeping. She was a mile down the road when she responded to an elemental glimmer of distrust for him and took a peek inside his backpack. Its contents were as follows: 1 coffee-stained copy of Games magazine and 1 half-eaten pack of Chuckles. "Owen, you idiot!" she shouted to no one. Miles away, Owen was cruising blissfully down Cashew Street when he suddenly slapped his head in agony. "Owen, you idiot!" he shouted to no one. "You gave her your work backpack by mistake. You put the manuscript in your leisure backpack." He then addressed the back seat. "Oh well, we'll call April and get you to her first thing in the morning, little guy." What he might have been speaking to was anybody's guess. It certainly wasn't his leisure backpack, which he believed to be resting comfortably back there, but was actually instead a full 28 inches away, perched precariously on the roof of his beleaguered Datsun, left there hours before when he put it there just for 2 seconds to pick up a dime off the street. Now, with every bump in the road, it threatened to leap without earthly regret into the beyond, taking the Cobbleswoddler's tail with it. 5 miles down the road, the still priceless play was within bare seconds of certain annihilation via low-hanging branch when Owen slammed on the brakes. "You know what?" he thought. "I really need to pick up some hair gel." He threw the car into reverse and headed for Walgreens. The backpack was fortunately saved from being hurled off the roof at the moment of drastic braking by getting caught on a truly disgusting accumulation of dried apple sauce 4 years in age, the result of an Easter prank on Nevin Smiley gone horribly awry. At least Owen realised as soon as he got inside his apartment what he'd done. Sort of. The problem now was he thought he'd left the backpack and enclosed manuscript back at Valid Cinemas after the previous evening's revival of Romy and Michelle's high school reunion. He was about to pointlessly scoot back there when the phone rang. He crossed his leak-laden apartment and picked up the cordless. "Hello?" he said meekly. "Mr. Trittle, this is Gaston Green from the Lofty Verb Theatre and Bedazzlement Company." "Oh, hi," he said. Hey, if you still want a copy of the play, there's been a slight snag. I had a very special one made all up for you, but I had some bad Thai food and I threw up all over it." "There is no need for your fabrications, Trittle," Green said tersely. "We have the play." "You took it? How?" "We had you followed, and we took it off the roof of your car when you were buying hair gel and baseball cards at Walgreens," Green told him. "I was right about you. You can't be trusted." "Listen," Owen said, pacing madly. "If anything happens to that play, I'll be lucky if I can find a job at Authentications by tomorrow." "It's being copied by hand right now," Green assured him. "Because I believe in the sanctity of a deal, you can pick it up at tomorrow's secret rehearsal. Now listen very, very carefully. The password to get into the rehearsal is—" "Oops, can you hold on? I've got another call," Owen interrupted him, and switched over without waiting for a response. As he had feared, April was on the other line. "Owen," she snapped, "you seem to have mistaken a landmark discovery in the timeline of Western literature for a copy of Games magazine. And you did the acrostics all wrong." Yeah," Owen ventured. "The thing is, the play got a slight bit purloined." "What?" "Don't worry," he assured April. "We can pick it up tomorrow morning. I know who has it." "Owen, that manuscript is worth hundreds of thousands of dollars." Not a problem," he countered. "It's totally safe and protected till then. More of a mix-up than a theft, really. I'll pick you up at 8:30. Where do you live?" "Unbelievable," she groaned into the phone. "Do you know Moistbrook Towers on Beveridge Street?" Owen stopped pacing. "Really? What's the apartment number?" 209. Owen stepped over to his front door, passing the slow-witted Dachshund he had bought 6 years ago, which hadn't moved from its comfort spot since, and opened it. He walked down the hallway, the cordless still pressed to his ear, looking left and right at the numbers stenciled poorly on the doors. He stopped at an apartment 40 feet from his own and rapped loudly. April opened it, dressed in baggy sweats, her hair in a lazy ponytail. "I'll be there," Owen said cheerfully into the phone. April rolled her eyes in an increasingly endearing fashion and closed the door in his face. Owen was halfway back to his own apartment when he remembered Gaston Green was still hanging on the other line. He clicked over to nothing but silence. "Oops," said Owen. Most of the way across the planet, in the most shadowy reaches of the dark continent of Africa, 2 sweat-soaked men were pushing their way clumsily through dense jungle foliage. The man in front was dressed most suitably for the task and whacked capably with a machete at the leaves and vines which threatened to strangle him at every turn. The man behind him, who'd been using the name Davy because he'd gotten sort of fond of it working back at the college, was wearing clothes he had arrived at the airport in and was not so adept at handling himself in the wild. Dardy's guide, a gruff gentleman by the name of Hawk, stopped him near the end of their trek and secured both hands around a shotgun. "This is it, buddy," Hawk told him. "This is where we get serious." Dari wiped the sweat from his eyes and realized now that yesterday, when he had thought nothing could be worse than the lousy time he'd had having in China, this was worse. "I've really gotten what I came to Africa for," he said to Hawk hopefully, using his pinky to escort a killer bee out of his ear. "Do you think you could take me back to the airport now?" Hawk was peering into the clearing ahead through a pair of binoculars. "My God, man," he panted. "You know I can't possibly let you leave this glorious land without first tasting the almost erotic triumph of killing a lion." Yes, no thank you," Dari said, and looked back over his shoulder at the spooky clutter of trees from which they had emerged. Didn't we come out here with one more person?" Hawk looked back too. "You're right," he agreed. "Sandpit probably got Dikweke. Don't worry, he can climb out, as long as he doesn't get too wiggly. Come on, there's a Hard Rock Cafe through those trees to the east. I could use a club sandwich." He moved forward again, and Dari reluctantly followed. 1825. His best friend Joff waited 2 full days for him to return from his damnable wanderings along the North Atlantic Ocean, and then he decided to intervene in the chaos Dari had allowed his life to become. He left his squalid room in the centre of town and walked 1/2 a mile to the east, moving with purpose through the town square, past peddlers, children, horses. The eastern part of town was home mostly to workers and the poor. Consulting his memory, Joff found his way to a tiny whitewashed affair with tufts of smoke rising from a chimney that seemed to be trying to separate itself entirely from the foundation. He rapped firmly on the door and waited. He'd come to hate the face that answered his call, Natalia Fisk, and her ridiculously soft blonde hair. She stopped herself from opening the door all the way when she realized it was Joff. "You're back," she said. He nodded testily. "I promise I won't return if you give me 5 minutes of your time. Please, miss." She stepped back after a moment and let him in. She crossed the room to the fireplace, only to find she could do nothing for the fire and needed something else to keep her busy. But there was nothing here. "I've come from Dari, naturally," Joff said, from the other side of the room, holding his cap in both hands. "He's written an entire play for you this time. I took a glance, though I wasn't supposed to. It's got more cross-outs than actual words, I think, but the dedication is fairly clear. First page and all that. I've come really to ask a favour. I wonder if you wouldn't mind releasing my friend utterly from whatever drama you're both ensnared in." Natalia decided then that she had to cross the room, keeping a good distance away from Joff, to where some flowers lay on the dining table. She felt fortunate that this would give her hand something to do, placing the newly cut flowers into the cheap vase beside them. "If love were as easy as the cubing of trout, I wouldn't be wandering this house alone today," she said quietly. Joff cleared his throat. "I've never been disposed towards very long relationships myself," he said. "I suppose it might be due in part to the growing fatigue I feel at watching so many good friends become unrecognizable to me in their pursuit of something I suspect might have less to do with true love than a sort of desperate, misguided longing for self-worth." Natalia set her flowers down, hung her head. "I'm damn tired, miss," Joff went on, "of dashing around town like a grocer's boy collecting a ransom on entire lives held hostage. It's not a friend's job to understand what Dari finds so alluring about a failed poetess who won't offer him the simple courtesy of cutting him off for good, but it must be something extraordinary to keep me coming back here, and I'm willing to trust him that." He turned to the door to leave, cursing himself silently for thinking this had been a good idea. "Perhaps I can spare you a journey or two by simply admitting I've been wrong," Natalia said suddenly, when Joff had already felt cool air touch him from outside upon turning the doorknob and replacing his cap upon his head. She'd taken a few steps toward him. She was standing as straight as she could. Joff respectfully removed his cap once more. "Perhaps if there were more people with the courage to do that, I could afford to walk much slower," he said gently. "Send him over today, Joff," she said. "This afternoon would be all right, or night also. Night would be fine." Joff could not go quite so far as to smile, but at least there was a great deal less bitterness in him when he pushed the door open a little wider. "Know something else, if you wish your collections to go easier," Natalia said to him, and in the brief flash of time it took for him to hear her words, she lost every ounce of strength she had summoned in the past minute, and tears came into her eyes, and her colour disappeared. There is nothing as unwelcome to the suffering, she told him, as an accurate interpretation of their heart. If only Dari had known by sending for him that day that she did not mean to make it seem that they would be together from then on. It would only have been the first of many conversations and silences, but Dari did not take Joff's news that way when he received it. Instead, Dari bounded right past him, burst out into the street, and tore across the square like a man in desperate need of cashing a lottery ticket before it suddenly expired. His measure of joy was rather embarrassing to watch, especially when he leapt up and snagged a foul ball that some local boy had smacked during their ragtag base-the-ball experiments. "Terrific play, sir!" one of the boys exclaimed, and then saw that Dari had no current intention of returning the ball, being far too engaged at the moment in expressing the apex of his romantic happiness by prancing in a bizarre circular pattern with no apparent terminus. But the terminus did finally come, and the terminus took the form of a goat, and Natalia was spared for all time the agony of having to impart to Dari only another maybe, another we'll see, one more perhaps we can try again in time. That pain was replaced by one so deep it would not leave her until her own death, still unmarried at age 57. At the moment of Natalia's passing, her elderly mother noticed how her daughter's right hand closed feebly in a fist, but she could not have known this odd reflex was her mind's tender attempt to return to the day she'd been so humbled by Joff Armit, and had morosely squeezed the stems of the flowers in her hands when he'd expressed so perfectly the hollow nature of love. The failed poetess Natalia Fisk had managed to move past the memory of Dari as she grew old, but her right hand remembered from time to time. That was the way of memory. Owen picked up April at the designated time the morning after the unpleasantness of the pilfered play, and proceeded to drive her toward the Lofty Verb Theatre and Bedazzlement Company. When they got downtown, Owen's stomach began pleading for a little help. "There's no chance you want to swing by the drive-through window at Chili now, is there?" he asked April at 9:07 a.m. In response, she looked at him as if he'd suggested they eat a bowlful of used nickels. So all she ordered from the place was a triple serving of the Emperor's 4-alarm meat party and a large order of potato eels. "How could you agree to slip those half-wits a copy of the play?" she asked him as she ate, taking a resentful sip from her black cherry soda. "If anyone's going to perform it, it should be professionals, on a stage that doesn't double on weekends as a volleyball court." "To be honest, I thought I could shake them down for some money," Owen replied. "I'm not some rich literature expert like you driving around in a fancy car and living up in Moistbrook Towers, you know." She grunted. It was kind of like an otter hiccuping. Owen found it lovely. Upon reaching the theatre, they trotted up the steps and entered. No one was there to meet them, so they crept, Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys style, into the auditorium. There was a large group of performers gathered on the stage, in the middle of what could only charitably be called a rehearsal. Owen was the first to notice that the backdrop and the many pieces of the set design seemed somewhat out of place with what he had read of the Cobbleswoddler's tale 2 evenings before. "Okay, there's no bungee jumping in the play that I recall," he said, noting an odd bridge-like contraption to which was secured a harness. "No scenes in the Vatican, and there sure as hell is no giant inflatable Neptune." April was staring in awed disbelief as an actor dressed as the Pope shuffled back and forth before the Rome-suggestive backdrop. "It's Rutherford Lamp's doing," she said, putting a hand to her forehead. "He's experimenting again. Remember the death of a headless salesman?" It was then that Gaston Green came rushing up behind them in a suit rife with fuzzies, a bit out of breath. "Trittle, thank God you're here," he said. "Come with me." He peered at April suspiciously. "Who are you?" "I'm the one person here who seems to know anything about Dari Stanislad," she told him. "All right, come backstage with me, both of you." They crossed through the lobby, went up a flight of stairs, and stood conspiratorially outside a dressing room. Owen had a side view through the wings onto the stage, where the director was instructing 2 actresses on the proper use of their lightsabers. Green handed Owen a crumpled note. "I was copying the play by hand," Green said, "and I left it just for a minute sitting on the radiator to get a lozenge for Mr. Lamp. When I came back, This note was in its place. Owen and April huddled their heads together and read, "We, the citizens of the Dick's Notch Citizens Brigade to protect the works of dead and defenceless authors, have regretfully found no choice but to steal the Cobbleswoddler's tale, and we will release it only when we are assured that its first production will be a tasteful one, and completely excludes the participation of Rutherford Lamp and the Lofty Verb Theatre and Bedazzlement Company, whose recent revival of The Odd Couple actually managed to threaten the very future of the American theatre. Send anyone but representatives of the Lofty Verb to Moistbrook Towers, apartment 402, tonight at midnight, and you will hear our demands." This note was printed on 100% recycled paper. "I need to copy the ending of the play," Green cried. "The cast is standing around with no finale, and we have a premiere on Saturday." "Saturday?" Owen bleated. "Ever considered rehearsing for a while?" "We have no choice," Green said. "Lord knows who those bloodthirsty terrorists are going to give the play to next. We have to be the first to perform it." April crossed her arms with a bit too much self-satisfaction. "Once the announcement's made that the play's going on so soon," she informed Owen, "the college is going to figure out it got out of your hands and into Lamp's." Owen winced. "An excellent point," he said. No, they won't," Green said. "We'll tell them we received a pirated copy from unknown sources, and you'll be absolved on one condition. Well, 9 conditions. First, we need you to go on Gavin Steed's public access show. It's the best and most inexpensive way to promote the play. You'll go on as an expert and tell the world they're not going to be disappointed in the production." Owen pointed to April. "Why not send an actual expert?" "Because the actual expert," she said, "is having no part of any of this fiasco." "Then why not send Lamp or someone else from the company?" Owen sputtered. Green grinned nervously. "Well, there's an unpleasant history. Gavin Steed despises the company ever since he blasted last year's production of the Alan Alda story, and Rutherford filled his mailbox with 60 pounds of bacon fat. The show is set to start taping this afternoon over at WKAS, so you need to be ready to go on the air very quickly." Owen thought about it. "All right, TV. I can do TV. What's the other condition?" "You have to rewrite the ending of this play for us, Trittle," Green begged. "I'm sure it's hideous, the whole thing is. My God, those endless speeches about the history of cobbleswaddling." "What makes you think I can write?" Owen asked him. "You're the only one we've got," Green said. "Rutherford has convinced everyone in the company that there's nothing wrong with the play, and they refuse to even touch it. He said he's going to use his mastery of improvisation to make up an ending right on stage." Owen turned to April's fiery stare. "Say, you'd chop off my head and turn it into a scented candle if I did this, right?" he inquired. "Immediately," she said, nodding. Owen turned back to Green. "I'm out," he said. "Just come up with a final scene in case we don't get the playback and we're left with no Act 4, Green said. "It's a simple matter of writing one scene on some old-looking paper in some old-sounding language and telling Rutherford we just found it. Think of it overnight, Owen, for the sake of saving your job." April had Owen drop her off at her apartment. On the way over, he tried to deflect her pique at their current predicament by launching attempts to discuss driveway weatherproofing techniques and modern advances in home canning. Neither topic was a go. After checking her messages, there was 0, none at all. April collapsed on her sofa. She found herself closing her eyes and wishing she were just back in bed, but she forbade herself from taking naps. Owen had made the mistake of telling her he never took less than 8 a week. She stared at her mantel for a while. Her 2 college degrees sat on the left-hand side. The rest of the lineup consisted of photographs of her mother and father and 6 pictures of April all by herself in the countries of Canada, England, Mexico, and Holland. She got up off the sofa and walked over to her TV set. 3 DVDs sat on top of it. 2 were movies bought for her by well-meaning friends who for some reason thought she'd have the slightest interest in watching The Matrix or Archery Basics with James Spader. The 3rd disc rested inside a plain black sleeve. A label on it read, "Heart Thumpers Video Dating Service. Because single life can make you want to eat glass." She put the DVD into her machine and pressed play. She flopped back on her sofa again preparing for the worst, and ruining the night she had been seduced by the internet into forking over $4.95 for Heart Thumper's introductory service. The first potential suitor on the disc sat in a chair against a plain red background. "Hi, my name is Dan Flanma," he said, "and I work in a pen shop. I also own an extensive collection of pens from all over the world, including some historical pens, like the pen Harry Dean Stanton once used to write an overdue rent check. I can prove that's the real pen, because they have ways of telling with science. I guess I'm looking for a woman a lot like my mother, who I live with because of my spells. The thing that absolutely shocks most people about felt tips is April hit the fast-forward button with great force. Thankfully, the rapid scanning deleted much of the next suitor, who wore both a turban and an eye patch, and who seemed to be gesticulating at the camera with increasing anger. She was deep into fast-forwarding past the third swain when she sat bolt upright. It was Owen. She backed up a ways and started him at the beginning. "My name is Owen," he said, seeming a trifle nervous. "I'm 35 years oldish, and I teach at a local community college. There was a glitch on the disc here, and April missed something." Beyond the glitch, Owen was staring at the ceiling with an extremely stupid look on his face. "The reason fire ants scare me so badly," he was saying, "is because there were suddenly more glitches. The disc was defective. Owen's ears became separated from the rest of his body, and the audio became a series of staticky beeps and boops." April rose to her feet in panic and rushed forward. A complete video wipeout ensued, and just as April reached out to press the power button, the DVD was ejected forcefully into her hands like a piece of wheat toast. "Stupid Radio Shack DVD player," she shouted. "File for bankruptcy already." Wheatables, her sickly orange cat, which hadn't moved from its comfort zone since Duran Duran had been hired to write the theme song to a James Bond movie, glanced up briefly. April looked at the clock and switched the TV over to Channel 12. Dick's Notch, City of the Proud, the city's only public affairs programme, started then. She almost laughed when she saw Owen sitting in a long-sleeved T-shirt and khaki pants, which to him must have been considered ultra-formal. His chair on the decrepit, gruesomely orange set rested between one supporting a bald 50-ish man, who looked vaguely familiar to April, and the host of the show, whom she knew from his part-time weekend shifts at Everything for Your Hermit Crab. "Hello and welcome to another edition of Dick's Notch, City of the Proud," the host announced into the camera. "I'm Gavin Steed. Joining me today is Frederick Laface, chairman of the literature department at the University of Iowa, and Owen Trittle, a man who once applied for a job as a file clerk there. Today we'll be discussing the recent discovery of Dari Stanislad's The Cobbleswoddler's Tale, and the deluge of national attention it has brought to our fair town. The world premiere of the play is set for Saturday afternoon, to be performed by Rutherford Lamp's Lofty Verb Theatre and Bedazzlement Company. Gentlemen, welcome." "Mr. Trittle," Steed began, "you are perhaps the only one to have actually read the play from beginning to end. What can we expect on Saturday?" "Well, Gavin," Owen said, "I think I can say without fear of hyperbole that this play will make the Iceman Cometh look like one of those crappy live nativities you see in a junior high school cafeteria." Gavin Steed and Frederick Laface merely gawked for a moment. At home, April's eyes got a bit wide. "High and bold praise indeed," Steed said, raising his eyebrows to the camera. "Oh, I can't trumpet this thing enough, Gavin," Owen said, crossing his legs a couple of times. "Reading the Cobbleswoddler's Tale and watching just a few minutes of Rutherford Lamp in rehearsal, I felt sure by the end of the premiere all other so-called artistic achievements, like the Sistine Chapel and the invention of music, should be completely obsolete." Gaston Green and Rutherford Lamp were watching the proceedings backstage at the Lofty Verb, huddled around a black and white TV. Green leapt out of his chair in mild outrage. "He's not mentioning the discount refreshments," he cried. Lamp stared into space reflectively. "I think Steed slept with my wife," he said to no one in particular, and temporarily removed his toupee. In the studio, Gavin Steed turned to his other panellist. "Mr. Laface, you've devoted a good part of your life to studying Dari Stanislad's works." "Oh yes," Laface said confidently, rubbing his hands together and grinning. "In fact, I courted my fiancée with his sonnets. But what's more important here, Mr. Trittle, is that I'm a little worried about the rumours that the Dix Notch Citizens Brigade to protect the works of the dead and defenceless authors has resurfaced somewhere in Iowa and has plans to somehow steal the play for their own obstructionist purposes. Certainly, Owen said, looking directly into the camera. I'm sure the college recognises that the Dix Notch Citizens Brigade represents the single greatest threat to American democracy we will ever know. With all due respect, sir, said Gavin Steed, that's hardly the best assurance. The wisdom of your college board of regents has come into question several times in past months. For instance, isn't it true that recently they would not allow any of the clocks on campus to be set ahead for daylight savings time? Watching the show in his efficiency apartment on Carrot Road, Nevin Smiley jumped out of his chair. That was a political protest against the state's unreasonable refusal to pay for new chalk, he shouted. Well, Owen said on air, obviously I'm not saying that Dix Notch Community College is an acceptable place to send one's child, but I believe and can assure everyone watching that the play is at the moment completely safe, and that there's no reason for Nevin Smiley or anyone else to think I have allowed any third party to have access to it for my own personal gain. The proof of this is that I have the original manuscript with me right here in the studio. With that, he lifted a handkerchief off an object sitting on the coffee table at their feet. It was a leather-bound manuscript of somewhat ancient nature, and he brought it up to his lap. April was quite puzzled by both the book's origin and Owen's decision to wear two differently coloured socks. Steed gazed at the manuscript with open lust. We'll be right back after these public service messages for a detailed description of what exactly Cobbleswoddling is, he said to the camera. Quite possibly the only other two people in Iowa watching the show that day were the young blokes named Titus and Kylie, who found themselves staring up at the ceiling-mounted TV at Prince Washalot with intense concentration. Man, I think that's the book we pawned to Citrus Donny, Titus despaired. The beginnings of an idea formed in the dimmest reaches of Kylie's brain. We gotta strike back, dude, he said, rubbing Pop-Tart stains out of his favourite 6 pairs of sweatpants. They're making a mockery of us, just like Baskin-Robbins did. Titus nodded pensively. You're right. It's just like that time at Baskin-Robbins. Okay, after Teletubbies, we're going to take direct action. Can your mum give us a ride? Owen called April from his apartment after the show. How was I on the tube? He asked her. 40 feet down the hall, April petted Wheatables and cradled the phone between her shoulder and her ear. I question the necessity of displaying a fake manuscript, she said. Just a little insurance against any completely valid accusations Green might make against me to Smiley, Owen said. What is it really? April asked. Owen leafed through the book's age-yellowed pages idly. I bought it at Citrus Donny's. It's a sex manual from 1895. Did you know that there was a position called the Gettysburg Address? Okay, we're done here, April said. I'm going to walk over to your apartment at 11:30 and we'll go up to the 4th floor from there. Now, if anything goes wrong tonight at the Citizens Brigade, we're going to the police. Understood? And the whole game is over. Don't worry, I'm a master negotiator, Owen said. I could con the bald off Charlie Brown. Bye, April said and hung up the phone, sighing. She got up to see if she had any Ritz crackers left in the cupboard. She looked down at the worthless DVD she had thrown on the floor. A few seconds later, she brought her hand slowly up to her mouth, which had formed itself into a very worried frisbee shape. Oh, hell, she whispered. She was right to worry. Down the hall, Owen was taking a DVD down from a shelf crammed full of George Romero films and episodes of The Outer Limits. The disc, featuring the recorded introductions of 19 women between the ages of 28 and 39, had sat neglected for 3 weeks, as Owen told himself again and again that there was no need to resort to such long-shot dating techniques. While he really should have spent the rest of the afternoon grading papers that Davy Staniston could not on his very sudden week off, Owen figured that it couldn't hurt to give the dating disc a quick once-over before his late afternoon nap series. He popped it into his player and settled back with a snack. When he saw that the first woman was April, his mouth involuntarily ejected a Frito across the room and toward the north wall of the apartment. April looked small in her wooden chair. I should start with my name, right? She said so softly that the cameraman could be heard adjusting the microphone off-screen to catch her weak words. She brushed her hair away from her face. "My name is April Mahone," she said. "I'm 33 years old, and I work in literary research. I like it. It's very nice." Owen watched her fidget, setting aside his snack slowly. "Sorry, I'm really nervous," she said. "Okay." She looked into the camera for the first time, and Owen could sense she was being directed to do this by an unseen hand. "I'm not really sure what I'm looking for in a relationship anymore," she said, and took a deep breath. "It's funny. I know there's no rational basis for believing I can't get through my whole life just by myself. I have friends, I like my work, I have lots to do. I don't think I especially want kids. So there's no reason for doing this, you know. It's silly. No matter who you're with, we all essentially go through life alone." Owen reached for the remote to maybe stop the disc. He felt like he was spying on her somehow. "I've told myself for a couple of years now that I don't need a relationship," April said. Her hand went through her hair once more, just for something to do, some comforting ritual. "It's too hard, though," she said. "I mean, it's hard to get up every day when you know for a fact that somewhere in the future you're guaranteed to have grieving and heartbreak, and chest pains and bad days, and falls on the stoop, and root canals, all of them just waiting for you. I don't think it's so much to ask," April said, her eyes rooted directly on the floor, "to have just one person tell me he'll stay up waiting for me at home when all that happens." That was all. The disc went on for 4 more seconds, and then someone in an editing room somewhere had the decency to star wipe out that scene and into the next one, which featured a woman 25 years past the age bracket Owen had specified, and who rambled on for 11 minutes about some bird who had died 40 years before. At 8 p.m. that evening, a mummy-thin woman in a yellow house dress stood on the stage at the Dix Notch Community College Theatre. Her entire body a tremor, she waved a damning finger into space and projected a voice filled with rage and terror across the auditorium. "You did this to him, didn't you, Jack?" she cried. "It was you who made these marks on Danny's neck, not the crazy woman in room 237. The spirit of this hotel has driven you mad." This woman's words might have had more weight had she not been speaking to a small lemon that sat impaled on a vertical stick at eye level. She stopped abruptly, winded. There was a scattered, uneasy applause from the rest of the class. The great acting teacher nodded, undoing the cap of his big pen. "Very good, Paula," he said. "Very, very good. Just out of curiosity, is anyone not doing a monologue from The Shining?" Out of the class of 12, 2 people raised their hands. One of them was April. "How about you, April?" the great acting teacher asked. "It's about time we finally got to hear from you. What do you have for us for your final soliloquy?" She stood up and took 1 step forward. "It's Lenore's speech as a ghost from It Might Have Been by Dari Stanislad," she said in a strangled voice. "All right, did you bring your focus fruit?" April held up a pear she had bought from the student cafeteria. "Then you can begin." The great acting teacher crossed his legs, and the rest of the class watched avidly as April forced her feet to take her forward. It was a grim, tortuous battle, but in the end, she was nominally the victor. No one in the auditorium knew how those 8 or 9 steps magically became the walk of a mile or more. She found some part of her mind clinging to the hope she might trip on the stage and fracture a minor bone of some sort. Turning around to face the class when she had climbed the stage and taken her mark was the worst part of a dozen worse parts. The relentless spotlight that the great acting teacher insisted on turning upon the stage seemed as hot as the sun and twice as blinding. April stuck her pear on the focus stick with uneasy hands and tried to clear her thoughts. Sweat trickled down her forehead. "Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy," she chanted in her brain. "Did your mother ever do a number on you?" At that same moment, Owen was sitting in Painting for You, Painting for Me, staring intently at the not quite empty canvas before him. Most of the other students, having received their final grades already, had filed out of the room. Professor Coopstein examined the work of a chap named Horace through eyeglasses smudged with tempera paint. "Not bad, Horace," he said, marking a B in his grade book. I like the way the shadows slanting through the stained glass window suggest dusk, but you might want to think about getting rid of Christ's third arm." Beatnik Lydia, who had taken to wearing a bright red cape to class, an oddish look for a 62-year-old, smiled wide as Coopstein approached. "Lydia, is that what I think it is?" he asked, mortified. "And is it going where I think it is?" "I sure hope so," she said happily. Coopstein nodded and sighed. "Most arousing, but I don't think we'll be putting it up with the others in the daycare centre." That left only Owen in the room to be judged, and to Coopstein this was actually a great relief, since he was the one student whose work could be described as almost never indicative of a dangerous split personality. But this time the professor was quite disappointed. "Owen, what happened?" he asked, looking at the half-completed, half-hour seascape Owen had tried to craft. "You didn't finish." The sky was an awkward mélange of blues and reds. The water itself looked like sandpaper. "Nope," Owen said quietly. "Why not? You were allowed to paint anything you wanted." Owen raised his brush one more time to get a little green in the upper part of the ocean, but then he stopped, finding it pointless. "It was terrible," Owen said. He set his brush gently on the ledge of the easel and affixed his gaze on the solitary man on the little beach. "I can only paint one thing, and that's my grandfather's creek," he said. "I remember it so flawlessly, every little detail. I mean, I just can't visualize anything else. I sit, and I sit. I can't even draw a believable tree unless it's in that particular field." He tried to laugh. No dice. "Sorry about that," he said. He took the easel with him when he went, but accidentally left his paint supplies. He never noticed they were gone. April's focus fruit fell off its stick once, which bought her a few seconds of time, but then there were some breathing problems. The pear itself became a vengeful member of the class, gawking at her expectantly. She could even imagine she saw two of the little dents in it become slanted eyes. She got her breathing under control only by mentally reciting the Russian alphabet. Then the shakes came, and that was a different story altogether. Owen stood around in the hallway outside the English office for a few minutes, certain that there was a trash can nearby big enough to hold his canvas. But the trash can down here was already overflowing. Owen swore under his breath and marched back down to the classroom where he spent most of his days, 5 days a week, 40 weeks a year. He unlocked the door and turned on the lights. He walked forward and took a seat in the third row, slouching and facing the blackboard, which was still marked with the ghosts of words he had written 6, maybe even 10 months ago. He noticed for the first time that even that night, the view from the centre of the classroom out the wide picture window was quite nice, looking down as it did on the gentle wooded depression that bordered the southern edge of the campus. If he'd looked beyond the trees, he might have just been able to see the auditorium where April Mahone stood silent on the barren stage, every clock in the entire world against her, and every face on the planet, not just those making up Acting for Hesitant Beginners 100, judging her. He would almost certainly have seen her emerge from the rear entrance of the building into the warm night after striding off the stage, not having uttered a single syllable, her face down. Sitting on the steps behind the auditorium, April looked up at the sky, which was littered with hundreds of dazzling stars. She felt just a twinge, a faint passing interior breeze of wonder, which was enough at least to bring her to her feet again. But she didn't last very long on them. It was easier to merely sit and not look any more at the stars, not to do anything. So that is exactly what she did. 0, nothing. Just like the idiot sky that did nothing all night but hang there with its fake magic and its completely false promises of unending beauty. And what was beauty anyway but... well, it was all that Dari Stanislad saw when he got off the plane in Iceland and returned to his hometown of Grindavik. Once there, he found himself unable to do much but stand silently in certain spots, like on the north shore of the North Atlantic, or outside the stables on Björgen Road, where his father had taught him not to be afraid of horses. Nowadays, in 2011, his favourite stretch of beach had become a condominium-infested resort spot, and the stables were long gone. The street where he had grown up was now filled with shops and cafes. At the top of the street, Dari stood in wonder before a tall painted wooden sign which read, Velhotten Street, Grindavik, birthplace and ancestral home of Dari Stanislad, Iceland's greatest writer and the world's most faithful romantic. He then took the downslope all the way to the end, passing cars, people with ice cream cones, running children. No one paid the least bit of attention to him. He was wearing sunglasses for the first time in his life, and he had parted his hair on the other side. He had also adopted a Milwaukee Brewers ball cap and a t-shirt from Old Navy. The house where he had grown up was too busy to enter. A short line of tourists waited outside patiently to begin their tour of what lay within. He saw that the preservationists had done quite a stunning job. The colour of the house's exterior were close to perfect. He wondered if the table at which he had begun to write his first words was still in there, and the original bed he'd shared with his brother. He was not able to stop himself from taking a right turn at the end of the street towards a quieter section of the town, which had mysteriously become hip in the almost 200 years since he'd seen it. 2 blocks over, he came into view of a red door marking a 1-story house, which almost made him faint when he saw how little it had changed. He went up to the house with the red door, which he had managed to open just twice in his short life. Both times, Natalia had almost been his. He pressed his face against the front window. Inside, a man was asleep in an easy chair. The fireplace where Natalia had long ago responded to Joff's final pleadings concerning her sad tumult with Dari had been cemented over, and now an entertainment centre, complete with TV, DVD player and TiVo, blocked its ghost over entirely. Natalia's mother had died in this house just 7 days after Natalia herself. A small boy sitting in front of the television turned his head, sensing someone was at the window, and he fixed Dari with a curious stare. Dari smiled and waved to him. He took a bus out of town, but he made the driver stop as they passed a large shopping centre on the Kopaska Road. Dari got off the bus and entered an establishment called Barnes & Noble. Inside there were more books than he'd ever seen in one place. In the bargain section, a voice spoke behind him. "Are you looking for anything special, sir?" a young woman wearing a name tag asked him. Dari pulled his ball cap lower over his face. Actually, he said, "I need to buy a gift for someone. A rather literary one, if possible." "Oh, that should be no problem," said the clerk. "There are plenty of good classics right here, if you'd like that." "Oh yes, these would probably do," said Dari. "You know Dari Stanislad, right?" she asked him, picking a book out of his wildly overrated sonnets. "Yes," Dari replied. "He's rather too wordy, I think." "I agree. Along the same lines, but even better in my opinion, is this." From the bottom shelf, the clerk removed a shiny trade paperback and put it into his hands. When he saw the title, Dari nearly fell over on the spot. Turning it over, reading the jacket copy so many times the letters began to blur, he simply closed his eyes and whispered this: "My lord. Oh, my dear lord." The dramatic showdown between Owen and April and the rabid terrorists calling themselves the Dix Notch Citizens Brigade to protect the works of dead and defenceless authors began at 11:57 p.m. when April rapped on the door of Owen's apartment. He answered promptly, ready to roll. Neither of them displayed to the other the slightest hint that their evenings thus far had been such punishers. "If you're even considering rewriting this play, I'll cut that monstrosity you call a sofa into little pieces and make you eat it," April reminded him in the elevator up to the 4th floor. "It wouldn't be the first time I had to eat the sofa," he said. "Look, I don't want to get fired over this. Green hasn't read the end of the play, right? We'll get the original back right now. I'll type the ending onto some blank paper, and I'll just say I rewrote it. He won't know the difference." The elevator door opened, and they padded down the hallway, stopping in front of apartment 402. "Meanwhile," April asked, "what if these nuts want $1 million for the manuscript?" "Then, April," came Owen's grave reply, "we must take them out by any means necessary." Owen knocked on the door. It was wrenched open by a small man in an ill-fitting turtleneck. He stepped aside and let them in, closing the door firmly and with admirable paranoia. Far behind them, a full 18 feet down the hallway, the conspiratorial faces of young Titus and Kylie appeared round the corner as if their heads were attached to the same stick. Owen and April stood expectantly in apartment 402. In the living room, several middle-aged men and women were sitting around on easy chairs and couches, playing chess or reading books of disturbing thickness. "So, you guys are the Citizens' Brigade," Owen observed pointlessly. "Please, don't hurt us." One of the men, balding and paunchy, rose from his study of George Orwell's later essays and approached them. "I'm Dennis, the group leader," he said. "Are you prepared to give us a guarantee that this work, if we relinquish it to you under our soon-to-be-disclosed terms, will be entrusted to a professional theatre company?" "Absolutely," Owen said. "I absolutely guarantee it. We need something more concrete. I'm not sure I can take the word of a man who is constantly jamming up the second-floor trash chute with pizza boxes." "Sure," Owen said. "I see your point. If you don't get what you want, then you can kill the girl." "Thanks," April said. "You must understand, it's not our feelings we care about in this matter," Dennis told them. "It's the young people who need to be exposed to the beauty of Dari Stanislad's words in a proper setting with the proper presentation." "Well, how about being exposed to a giant inflatable Neptune?" April asked. "Because this play is being performed by Rutherford Lamp on Saturday afternoon, no matter what we do." April," Owen said. "By telling them this, we gain what advantage?" "In that case," Dennis announced, "you shall never, ever have the play. Corbett!" he shouted towards the kitchen. "There is no deal." Corbett, who looked like a very high-quality digital photocopy of Dennis, emerged from the kitchen, a spatula in one hand, trembling somewhat. "What's the matter?" Dennis asked. "Did you finish reading it?" Yes," Corbett answered. "Yes, I did." He turned to Owen. "Would you like it back? I'll get it for you." "What?" Dennis cried. "That would be splendid, yes, thank you," April said. Corbett nodded. "Sure, no problem." Dennis began to vibrate with frustration. "Corbett, are you mad? You're betraying everything we stand for." "That's okay," Corbett said, "because the play is really, really, really bad." "Did you know it was this bad?" he asked April. "Did you know about the cussing and the repeated cutaways to beginnings of Cobbleswoddling?" Owen and April brushed past him. Corbett collapsed in a chair before a newly laid-out game of Scrabble. Dennis took the spatula out of Corbett's hands and pointed it accusingly at the room. "Okay, remind me to teach you people again how the Dick's Notch Citizens Brigade to protect the works of dead and defenceless authors ransom something off," he bellowed. "There are a few subtle points you don't seem to be grasping." In the kitchen, Owen grabbed 2 fresh brownies off a plate beside a toaster oven while April looked left and right. There was no sign of the play. "Oh, crap!" Owen shouted, pointing toward the window. A pair of Bejean's legs were squirming out of it, kicking and flailing. He dashed over to the legs and grabbed them. It looked like Owen was wrestling with a wheelbarrow. First, Kylie's shoes popped off in his hands, and Owen hurled them away. Then Kylie's jeans began to slide down to his ankles. Owen let go. Kylie's legs disappeared from view. Seeing that April had already backtracked and dashed through the apartment in an attempt to cut the thieves off down below, Owen clambered up onto the sink and wedged his own body into the window. Still just a 32 waist after all these years, if April had only known, he forced himself through it and into the night. It was a 3-foot drop down to the downsloping hill that began just behind the 4th floor of the building. Kylie and Titus were log-rolling down it at great speed, the manuscript clutched firmly to Titus's body. Owen began to skitter down the slope, quickly tripped, and began log-rolling himself. He slammed into Titus and Kylie where the slope met even landscape. The 2 noble potheads got up and dashed madly towards an open field. Owen, out of breath since the mid-90s, galloped after them as best he could. It was April, coming from the other direction, who saved the day. Seeing Titus and Kylie coming hard, she dropped to the ground and rolled forward like a bowling ball, cutting them down below the knees. They both went tumbling. The manuscript shot off 8 feet to the left, and there was a scramble. "Man, you Rhodes Scholars can really put a nasty hit on someone," Owen said as he joined the fray. Soon the 4 of them were writhing on the ground, hands in each other's faces, clawing and clutching to come up with the play. Titus got to it first, and he held it away from April's reach. She pinned him down and flailed at it wildly. "Hand it over, little man," she shouted. "Never," Titus said proudly, squirming relentlessly. "It was ours to begin with," Kylie yelled, his cheek pressed into the grass by Owen's right kneecap. "If we'd known it was written by some movie star, we wouldn't have sold it for a pair of big pants." "It's art, damn it," April barked, her right elbow squished beneath Kylie's forehead. "You can't just go around selling it to the highest bidder." Finally, she managed to extricate the manuscript from Titus's grasp, and she rolled away, standing with some effort, brushing the dirt off her pants. Titus remained motionless on the ground. But doesn't art truly belong to those souls who need it most? He pondered aloud. We'll give you $20 for it, Owen said. Sold, Kylie trumpeted with glee. Owen tugged on April's elbow. Could I borrow 20 off you for an hour? He asked her. She dug into her pocket without a word and gave the money to Titus, who snatched it away. He and Kylie galloped away into the night. Sadly enough, they're two of my brighter students, Owen remarked when Titus and Kylie had departed, then glanced at the manuscript with a tinge of shame. So I suppose you'll, be keeping that now, eh? April placed the play firmly between her arm and her right side. Yes, I will, she said. I'm going to go home and give it the attention it deserves. Let's see Lamp perform a play whose ending he's never got to see. I think he'll call it off, don't you? Oh, absolutely, I mean. Where's he going to get an ending? I'm not going to write one just to go on eating and breathing and paying my rent. April turned away without a word and walked off in the general direction of the parking lot. A little constructive criticism, Owen called after her. I think you may be taking that thing a little too seriously. April halted in her tracks and turned around slowly. Say again, she said. April, he said, his shoulders dropping in exhaustion. You're giving those pages a meaning they don't really deserve. I mean, I just don't understand an intelligent person's ferocious attachment to a bunch of words, which, springtimey and rainbowy as they may be, have about as much utility in the real world as the speedometer on a moped. April came forward. She took the book from her side and held it up for his observation. Yes, Owen, she said, I take this way too seriously. Guess what? This is my life. I've chosen this instead of real things. I can take a play down off my shelf any time I want and never be disappointed by it, unlike any one of 24 human beings I can mention. I married myself to books instead of some well-meaning zombie who might woo me with romance and the ocean for about 3 months before the stupefying day-to-day monotony of an actual relationship dulls us both into a 50-year catatonia. A few raindrops fell, but she would not be the one to run away from them first. You know, I was married once, Owen said to her, and it wasn't anything like that. Far from it. April looked at his face for any sign of a joke or remark that would turn his previous sentence into something utterly forgettable, but nothing came. Do you see what's happened? He asked her. These books and plays have set an impossible standard for you. People aren't knights, he said. They can't always be so wonderful, and people fail too. Which is something I think Dari Stanislad was afraid to admit. She nodded, looking off into the distance. I know it, she said. I know they fail. Owen spread his empty arms out. I got nothing to compete with that stuff, April. You want to hear the fluffiest words I can think of? I think you're pretty and smart. And I think I could trick you into being really, really silly sometimes. And maybe we'd have fun. Or maybe not. She sighed and shook her head. I don't know anything about you, Owen. He smiled a little. What's there to know? Single white male, 35 years old, seeks non-smoker to ignore all flaws, some Windows knowledge preferred. Who could resist that? She said, without any real meaning, either good or bad. Owen turned away, scooping the neck of his shirt over his head against the increasingly heavy rain, preparing for the run back up the hill. I'm going this way. Gonna go get Kylie's shoes back for him, he said. He won't make it in this world without them. I'll see you at the thing on Saturday, okay? Okay, she said. She watched him go scrambling up the slope, slipping a couple of times in the newly moistened grass, then achieving a tricky balancing act as he manoeuvred his way back through the kitchen window. He turned before he disappeared entirely and waved to her. She waved back. At 2:15 a.m, Owen found himself hunched over a manual typewriter in the English office, working only by the light of one of Davy's candles. Beside him was the short stack of pages he'd punched a few words onto and then consigned to the desperation pile. Owen was startled to see Davy Stanislad appear in the doorway, scissors and a can of paste in his hands. Davy, what are you doing here this late? Davy smiled. I just got in from a little trip, and I missed my landlady's curfew, so I thought I'd come in and do a little work. And you? Owen ran his hands through his hair, scratching his scalp insanely. I've been saddled with an impossible task, Davy. I don't suppose you know anything about Dari Stanislad. I'm trying to write a little something in his style. Davy bit his lip. Nope, sorry, I was never much on that era. How is the play? Owen dropped his head onto the typewriter's plate and... Ugh, How could the man have written such an atrocity? I wrote something once, Davy said. A play, actually, and I thought it was beautiful. But it came from so deep within me, from such pain and confusion, that my judgment became clouded. I couldn't see what I had done was so poor because I couldn't see at all. When I realised this, I tried to save it by changing it to appeal to the shallowest tastes of the masses. Eventually all that was left was the barest marrow of my intention. Sorry to hear it, my man, Owen said. So anyway, you went on a trip. Where'd you go? Here and there, Davy said. Nothing special. Owen rose to fetch a grape soda from the vending machine outside. As he passed Davy, he got one more very good look at his face in the candlelight, and had to once again shake his head in wonderment. Wait, it's not Kevin Spacey you look like, he said, leaning in a bit. You know who it is? Conan O'Brien. He moved past Davy, but paused at the door. Man, that's just freaky, he said. He left Davy to think about it for a while. Davy lit a new candle for Owen, blew the old one out, and when Owen returned, he was gone. Dari, as exhausted as a human being, even a ghost, could possibly be, walked to his tiny boarding house, climbed up an ivy trellis into his room, and fell soundly asleep. The things he had brought back with him from his globe-trotting journey lay all around him. Saturday afternoon brought tremendous excitement to Dix Notch, Iowa. The Lofty Verb Theatre and Bedazzlement Company issued 12 press credentials for the first ever performance of the Cobbleswoddler's Tale and spent $38 on velvet ropes to corral the customers outside the box office. The 2-month-old Twizzlers at the concessions counter were replaced with 1-month-old Red Hots. The deeply confusing symbols on the restroom doors were replaced with standardized man-woman designs. The Dix Notch glitterati turned out in force at 1 o'clock to witness history in the making. April got to the theatre earlier than almost anyone and was the first to be admitted within. She placed a jacket on the seat beside her to save it for Owen. By 12:45, the house was almost filled to capacity, another first for the Lofty Verb, which had been falsifying attendance figures for years. Owen got to the box office at 10 till 1 and spoke cheerfully through the little metal sieve. "Hello, there's a ticket on hold for me. The name is Owen Trittle," he said. The woman behind the glass took his ticket out of an envelope and pushed it out to him, offering a smile as weak as a baby duck. She'd been working at the Lofty Verb for less than 3 days. She simply hadn't known what else to do. She suddenly found herself in this strange town, in this mystifying time, with no explanation and no guidance, so getting a job had seemed like a positive step, and because she had no money, a necessary one. She'd taken over shifts once worked by lonely Pimmer, who'd left to spend a little more time with her ailing mother and perhaps search for a more cheerful job to be the 6th one she worked simultaneously. For the new ticket seller, maybe the answers would come later. All she could do was wait and hope and try to deal with the fact that everything moved so fast here, from the vehicles to the people to time itself, which everyone seemed so obsessed with, chasing after it frantically, needing to know exactly where it was going. She pushed her long blonde hair behind her ear, straightened her name tag, which kept falling off, and smiled emptily at the next customer, yearning for the end of her shift. Owen wended his way through the rows of theatre seats down toward April, who held up a hand so he could see her. He took his seat beside her just as the house lights went down. "So, what did you think of the play?" he asked her. "You were right," she said, downcast. "It's not worthy of his name, or almost anyone else's, but it has a chance if people make it to the end. And if Lamp and Green even got to read that far, Fiona's last speech has a real beauty to it." "I agree," Owen said. "I was rewriting Act 4 last night." April's mouth opened in enraged shock. "And I remembered how potentially good that part of it was," he finished quickly. "So I tore up the one I'd done and decided to let the chips fall. I figure if Green goes to Smiley and rats me out and I get fired, the college is so messed up I can probably get a job in a different department and no one would figure it out. I've done it before." She breathed a final sigh of relief. "I'm proud of you," she told him. Suddenly the curtain parted and the crowd hushed. Rutherford Lamp emerged from the wings and walked to centre stage, wearing the costume of a very overdressed king. He had raided the company's wardrobe closet for all it was worth, in the hopes that it would distract people from the fact that Act 4 was going to be a totally improvised free-for-all. Her current duties in the box office at an end, Natalia Fisk slipped behind the back row of the theatre and forced herself to watch, thinking she would not be noticed. "Ladies and gentlemen," Rutherford Lamp began, "over the years I have brought you many an amazing spectacle. It was on this very stage that you witnessed the birth of Jesus, the murder of Julius Caesar, the travails of Danny and Sandra Dee, and a brave young woman named Rizzo. But none of these dramatizations was so rare and vivid as today's performance of the great Dari Stanislad's rediscovered classic, The Cobbleswoddler's Tale. The Lofty Verb Theatre and Bedazzlement Company is proud to be the first to perform this masterpiece, just as we were proud last year to be the first to perform our own daring stage version of the popular board game Boggle." There was the sound of trumpets from offstage, and the lights changed from a sickly yellow to a glaring red. "Now then," Lamp said, "I invite you all to enter the windy, tumultuous Iceland of the 19th century. This theatre is about to become a time machine. And now, let us away." Rutherford Lamp strode off the stage to a final crescendo of brass, and the backdrop came into place, and the play began, and there was much attention riveted directly forward. It lasted about 19 minutes. At 1:27, less than a half hour after Rutherford Lamp had first taken the stage, April Mahone and Owen Trittle were the only two souls remaining inside the theatre. Even the press had left for good. The cast and crew had secured the rear entrances, and in fear of the reprisals that awaited them in the outside world, had scavenged enough provisions in the form of cheese and cracker trays and mini sandwiches to last a full 24 hours if necessary. Rutherford Lamp had been the last member of the troupe to leave the stage, chased off only by a series of verbal insults from the first row which had called his very species into question. "Wow," Owen said, after an especially morose silence had passed between himself and April. "I haven't seen that many people rush for the exit since Bill Buckner missed that grounder in the '86 World Series." April folded her programme neatly in two and looked down at it with genuine sadness. "I guess there won't be a last speech by Fiona," she said. "Maybe ever." Her eyes went to the empty stage, where the big inflatable Neptune hadn't even had a chance to make its dramatic entrance. Owen rose from his seat. "Well, it's over," he said. "Come on. Come for some pizza with me, April. We can get 2 slices for $1 at Itzo's if we can name 10 cast members from the Saw movies." "You go ahead," she said. "I'm going to sit here for a while." Owen left her gently, not knowing what else to do. The last person in the world he wanted to run into on the sidewalk just outside the theatre appeared there with flawless timing. "I know what you're going to say, Nevin," Owen said to President Smiley, holding one hand up. "I admit I leaked the play to Lamp. I'll clean out my desk by 5. "I couldn't care less, Owen," Smiley said, almost hopping up and down with pep, vigour and vim. "This is the best day of my life. 10 minutes before showtime, Verizon Wireless purchased the original manuscript of the Cobbleswoddler's Tale from Dix Notch Community College for $2 million. $2 million, Owen repeated, dumbfounded. "What's the college going to do with all that money?" "Oh, don't you worry," Smiley said. "It's already being put to good use." Even as he spoke, 42 gleaming panel trucks filled with boxes of pure white presentation chalk were storming out of a warehouse in Plimpton, Illinois, slated for delivery by Monday morning. Enough pure white presentation chalk to last Dix Notch Community College for approximately 4,000 years. April waited a good 5 minutes for Owen to come back. But when he did not return within that time, she walked up to the stage with a clear mind, and she climbed onto it. There was a time when she would have imagined a packed house there, 2,000 people who had waited in line for the chance to see the great actress. Now, thousands of miles from the Broadway of her young dreams, it was enough for April to have empty seats as her audience, because empty seats forgot quite quickly. She knelt on the stage of the Lofty Verb Theatre and Bedazzlement Company and listened for the slightest sound from the wings. "What a fool my beloved must believe me," she said aloud, her voice carrying at first just 10 rows back, but then farther and farther as she went on, becoming finally unafraid. "Sitting here where no one can see, pining for one my father calls a friend." She stopped there, very close to ending this. It served no purpose, really. But then she kept speaking. Act 3, Scene 5 of the Cobbleswoddler's Tale, brought into being through the sheer force of will. "While you are 35, I am but 20, she said to the empty theatre. The world is something you made on Sunday as jest, but for me, it's just begun. When you were 30, I was but 15. As you rode your loyal horses into battle, I shied away from the stable, afraid to scuff my knees should I fall into the grass. When 25 years you had burned away in strength, you fought for a country I'd only read about in books. At 20, you must have loved a dozen women, while love was a talisman they would not let me see. With infinite gentleness, April cradled her hands around the letter that had never made its appearance that day, Nicolaus's letter from Act 2, Scene 3. And this, she said, written when you were 15, filled with such passion I've been too young to understand. What were you like back then, your life causing such tumult that the maids of summer mistook you for the rolling thunder? A footstep tapped the carpet several feet away. Yes, it was a noisy striving, said a voice off to her left, and April's heart leapt into her throat. She turned to see Owen standing in the aisle. She would have run, vowing never to come back to her awful job in this awful town, but Owen had known the line. He had known the line. Some men work in volume, he said, and he took the 3 steps up to the stage without taking his eyes off April. I clashed with comrades just to hear the echo of my fight. I bounded to every balcony just to know the shout of a young girl's reply. Owen kept moving until he stood in front of April, and he took the letter that was not there from her trembling hands. She gave it up willingly enough. Your youth was a roaring symphony when my ears were too small to learn the tune, April told him. I must have made such a racket, Owen said gently. Your father could hear me beside your crib. April took Owen's hand, because that is what the stage directions had specified. The directions had been very clear, and what choice did she have but to follow them? This is what she replied to her beloved's final words. There, within that hopeful cradle, my heart could be found. One tiny note of silence in search of sound. Eventually, April let go of Owen's hand, and he lowered it to his side with regret. You memorized that too, she said to Owen. Why? Why did you do that? He sighed. I had some stupid idea that we might perform it together some day, he said. It was part of a much larger and very convoluted plan to win you over. It was nice, she said. I could change myself a little bit, Owen told her, hopefully. Not much. I mean, I'm no magician, but enough so you'd know I'd meant it, I think. She smiled at him. As long as we mean things, that's some kind of start, she said. Owen stooped to pick up Nicolaus's invisible letter as they left the stage. He crumpled it in his hands and tossed it into the nearest trash can. Natalia, Dari Stanislad said to the woman in the box office. She'd been in the middle of Windexing the ticket window after witnessing the disaster of the play, when that one word jolted her out of her efforts. Through a misty fog of ammonia and blue dye, she saw the blurry image of a man in a black t-shirt and sunglasses who knew her name. Only when he took his sunglasses off did his image become clear. Off to her right, Owen and April headed down the sidewalk, oblivious. Some part of Natalia's soul abandoned her body entirely upon recognizing Dari. This she felt instantly, as a physical pain and an emotional thunderclap like being catapulted, or more accurately like being born. Do you remember what you said to me before we parted? Dari asked her. You said I spent too much time writing the words and not enough proving them. He was holding something himself, she saw, an oversized shopping bag from the nearby Save or Not. He stepped up to the glass and set it carefully on the pavement at his feet. I told you I'd go to the 4 corners of the earth for you, he said, and you doubted me. You said that was just an empty phrase that writers use, and that you were afraid to be with anyone who traded so effortlessly in those beautiful little eyes. I still remember how impressed I thought you'd be when I whispered that. I'd go to the 4 corners of the earth. Well, I did it, Natalia. I figured I had to. I brought you some things. He reached into the shopping bag and brought out his gifts one by one. From China? One of those little dolls you once saw in a book and always wanted. Dari held it up for her to see. He set it on the ledge so that its little body was facing out over the street. She had told him of her desire for one of these exactly once when they had first met at a swap meet in 1822. "From Africa," he went on, "the kind of shawl they make there. It's your favourite colour, dark green. I hope I remembered that right." This he wrapped with great care around her Chinese doll. "This may be the best of all," he said, taking from the bag a small book with a glossy dark blue cover. "Look, I found it in Grindavik." This object he pushed through the money slot so she could feel it for herself. She lifted the book, turned it over so she could read the front cover. "They're your poems, Natalia," Dari said. "In this century. You're famous." The title of the book, a tasteful penguin edition, was Whatever You Find Within You, the collected poems of Natalia Fisk. Leafing through the pages, seeing her words set in type, she began to cry, not just for the heft of a book she'd never thought would exist, but for the sudden immensity of life itself, and for the indecipherable moment which had chosen to enfold her. "It took a long, long time, but your dream came true," Dari said. At long last, Natalia lowered the book and awaited what came next. "Now, I had to cheat a bit in the end," Dari said. "I ran out of time and money. But I guess you could consider Dix Notch, Iowa, a corner of the earth. That's where someone gave me this." From the bag he took a rectangular canvas, which he'd not yet had a chance to frame. Its creator had only produced it for an art class a few weeks before. He lifted it for her, and she saw a soft landscape done in oils, a landscape cutting through a field in spring. The bank of a nearby creek was sheltered by evergreens. The sky was so blue it put reality to shame. Owen always had a way with skies. "It's exquisite," Natalia said, her first words to him in 186 years. "Where is that, Dari?" "It's only an ordinary place in Iowa, America," he said, "except that it's where I hope we'll be married someday." Natalia opened the side door of the box office and stepped out onto the sidewalk, cradling her poems to her chest. For all she understood of reality, she might be there beside that creek less than a minute from now, or not for 1,000 years, or maybe she was already there and she would have to wait for Dari's gentle hand to wake her from her dream. "I didn't know why I woke here until now," she whispered. "I want to write again, Natalia," Dari said, "and there won't be any empty phrases anymore. I swear it." "I believe you," she replied. "I believe you." He smiled. "What time do you get off work?" he asked her. But wait, big things were happening just a mile away, in the cavernous depths of Citrus Donny's used books, records and pants. It was no less an auspicious local figure than the host of Dix Notch, City of the Proud, Gavin Steed, who stepped into the vortex of the universe's swirling hurricane of destiny that day. Searching for a book of easy-to-remember ethnic jokes that he could use to pep up the show, he stumbled across a musty tome which caused his hands to tremble and his contact lenses to nearly pop out of his head. He made his way to the register with as much speed as his skinny legs could muster. "I must purchase this volume at any price you name," he panted to Citrus Donny, slapping the book on the front counter. "How long has this just been sitting on the shelf?" "The inventory is a perpetual mystery to me, my friend," Donny mused. "Are you prepared to offer, say, $7 for the item?" "Sold!" Steed cried, and slapped a $10 bill beside the book, which was about to make him an enormously wealthy man. Its cover, tattered and frayed but still perfectly intact, pretty much spoke for itself in bold white lettering, which had been unseen by anyone but its creator for nearly half a century. The title of the book was My Happy Secret Life as a Remorseless Nazi Conspirator, by Audrey Hepburn. Outside the store, everyone in Dix Notch was busy taking notice of a strange young man who had appeared in town seemingly out of nowhere, dressed in clothing nearly 2 centuries out of date. Though there was no way anyone could have known this, the young man looked a great deal like Dari's old friend Joff. And this afternoon he'd finally figured out why he'd been dropped the week before right in the middle of the year 2011. And now he intended to do something about it. He was on a mission. He bought some sunflowers from the first vendor he found, and he began to carry them westward along Apple Avenue with him, grinning like a damn fool, basking in the feel of the sun on his face and the clap of the dry pavement passing beneath his boots. As he went, Dozens of friendly townspeople smiled at him, knowing quite well the look of a man with a woman in his heart, a look Joff had never really experienced firsthand until now. Passers-by may have chuckled at his weird clothes, but there was no mistaking his determination. As the blocks went by, some even felt like cheering him on and slapping him on the back. Pancake Street, Orange Juice Road, Strawberry Boulevard. He held his flowers firmly and nodded politely to all whom he met on his way. At last, he walked into Authentications by Tomorrow, and he approached the bespectacled lonely lass, whose name he knew was Pimmer. Pimmer, who had entranced him with her melancholy shyness and vague terror at the prospect of almost any human interaction. He had never spoken to her, and he saw no need to, even now, simply holding out the sunflowers across the counter. When she saw what the stranger had brought her, and how his face promised absolutely no harm, the smile, which had never known real freedom, beamed brilliantly across the empty space between their hands and remained shining in that tiny strip mall for as long as their story's pages can be turned and turned again.